Hello and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is May 5th, 2022, and I am over the moon, super excited for today's episode. We have in studio the wonderful, the brilliant, the insightful Jenn. Hey, Jenn. Good to have you.
I was waiting for you to go to Holly first. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
And we're doing something kind of new and exciting today on the podcast. So normally we interview, progressive and post-Mormons that happen to be in the Salt Lake City area. Occasionally we do remote interviews over the internet with people that can't join us in Salt Lake. And occasionally we interview people who were raised in other faith traditions like Scientology or Jehovah's Witnesses or, Orthodox Judaism. And those have been some of my favorite episodes, like Chris Shelton, Lloyd Evans, so many others that I'm going to forget to mention. But one area of high demand religion that we've never really explored on Mormon Stories is Evangelical Christianity. And that's been something that's been a long time coming. And recently, my dear friend, Steve Kovalenko, reached out to me and told me about this amazing podcast called Mega that is kind of a religious satire comedy podcast that is led by a woman named Holly Laurent. And so Stephen was kind enough to hook me up with Holly and her husband, and we got to know them a little bit, and we decided to do something that we don't do. We flew Holly to Salt Lake City. Jenn and I picked her up at the airport, and we are going to be covering kind of like, a faith journey of someone who was kind of born and raised into evangelical Christianity and then has left it. And is a comedian now, a brilliant, funny, insightful comedian who also runs a podcast. And she came up with the title From Christianity to Comedy. Is that right?
Or replacing Christ with comedy?
That's it.
Yeah,
Replacing Christ with comedy.
If you like it, John.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. So Holly Laurent, welcome to Mormon Stories podcast.
Thank you so much, John and Jenn. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled.
Oh, man.
And as I look at your kind of like your vita, or your description, like you've done a lot of cool stuff. So you've written for The Onion, which is awesome. You trained at Second City, and that's where all my favorite comedians of the 70s, John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Jane Curtin, Gilda Radner, like all the Saturday Night Live, a lot of the Saturday Night Live folks came out of Second City. You freaking trained there. Margie and I went there once and just had the Second City experience. And you've even, you studied at Columbia College, which is super impressive, right? Columbia. and you've been on CBS and NBC and Comedy Central, Funny or Die, which I love. And you've even been on the Late Late Show with James Corden. So you've been you're like a superstar.
Oh, what I've always wanted to hear. I've done it.
No, but we're so glad to have you. And a shout out to Steve for kind of making this happen. But let's start from the beginning. Is that all right?
Fantastic.
Okay. So were your parents Christians before you were born?
Yes.
Or do you know?
Yeah. Because my parents got together by starting one of the first ever Christian rock bands in the 1970s called the Good News Circle.
So were they converts to Christianity or had they been raised Christian?
My mom is a preacher's kid, and so it was all she ever knew. And my dad was raised by a mean alcoholic and pill popper who then replaced the alcoholism with fundamental baptism.
Ooh.
And
what states were they in, your parents?
My mom grew up in Michigan and my dad grew up in Illinois. My dad came from Springfield and my mom came from Cadillac, Michigan. But they met, the way my dad tells it is my mom was on a outreach music group from Judson College where she went to school. And she was singing in some church for some special music program, and my dad was there with a friend brought him, and my dad said he was who is that on the piano? I like what I see. And the way he tells it is that he dropped out of Millikan University and enrolled in Judson College to go try to date my mom.
Yeah. Okay. So did they meet in a religious context then, kind of?
They met at a Christian college, and then they started a band because they're both really musical. And
do you know around what decade or year? Was it like during the 70s? Was it during Woodstock? Was it in the 80s? Like when? In the 60s? Do you know, like, I'm trying to, like, is it Beatles time? Is this Janis Joplin? Like when?
Yeah, I'd say it was like late 60s.
Late 60s.
Yeah. Well, no, I know exactly when. If they were born in 47 and they got married when they were 20, they got married in 67.
Yeah, okay.
So the mid 60s is when they met.
This is like right around the time I'm born, 69. Beatles are raging. Woodstock's about to happen.
Yeah.
Hippie town, Haight-Ashbury, marijuana, long hair. Your parents are Christians, raised in Christian homes, and they meet and they want to start a Christian rock band. I love it. I love how this is starting.
Yeah. And like my dad was Beatles crazy and very much a Simon and Garfunkel, all that.
Yeah.
And like those, and even like sometimes their music, I have their vinyl albums. Like I almost hear sometimes The Dead in there, a little bit of CCR,
Right.
a little bit of like Mamas and the Papas,
Yeah.
a little bit of, you can hear all those influences of the time, but they were singing about this long-haired counterculture Jesus dude who loves you like you have never been loved before. You're going to love this love. It's going to feel so good.
Would they have ever told you whether they were like obeying all the rules or whether their form of Christianity was kind of like wouldn't meet the purity standards of today kind of thing? Do you even know?
They told me they were virgins on their wedding night. They didn't even know how to do it. Like,
So no drugs, they wouldn't have been smoking weed or
neither of them have ever had a drink or smoke of anything in their life.
Oh.
They're very, and for my dad, and you might have had some of this from listening to some of your experience, John. My dad kind of came by the no booze thing. Honestly, he like grew up. His grandpa ran a bar, and he used to have to clean as a kid. He would like clean up this tap. I think it was like the Laurent Tavern or something in Springfield, and there'd be like vomit and stuff, and he was a kid and he was like, this is gross. And also like his dad would get drunk and like make his sons like punch each other in the face and stuff. And like,
was this before or after his dad had converted to Christianity?
his dad, it was really weird, I think, for my dad, because his parents were so hard. You know, his mom, she'd go to a bunch of different doctors and get a bunch of different pills and just sort of be like slurring her words like on the couch. And so he'd be embarrassed to like have friends over. And his dad was pretty mean. And
even after Christianity.
Well, I think they kind of came to it sort of at the same time, but they came to different versions.
Oh, okay.
I actually, now that you say this, I don't know what
I just wonder if his parents cleaned up at some point, or if there was always a mess. You know,
his parents cleaned up that they went in a direction that my dad always thought. The way my dad always described it to me was, he was like, "Hal, they're about the law." You know, and Jesus tells us it's not about the law, it's about love, you know. And my parents were really swept up in the Jesus movement was the Jesus movement, the early 70s? It might have been, but they were really into that counterculture, you know, like them doing Christian rock was very hard on, like my mom's parents were like, excuse me? Because, you know, like it's organ, it's piano, and no clapping, you know, with hymns and stuff.
So both your parents grew up in kind of eventually strict Christian homes.
Yeah. Well, I think once my dad was out of the house, I think, man, that's interesting. I should ask him. I have a really bad memory.
That's
and I
fine.
think some of that is trauma. Some of that might be cannabis, but I want to ask my dad that, because my dad, I think once he was out of the home, somehow his father, my paternal converted to this really wild,
Like a
fundamentalist Baptist in Crown Point, Indiana, called Bethel or Baptist City. It's a church called Baptist City, and it was very like women had to wear dresses, you know, all that stuff of like you know, very prohibitive dresses, and their big thing was soul winning. absolute purity culture. There's a college that I don't think is accredited or anything called Hiles-Anderson University in Hammond, Indiana. Hammond? Anyway, where my grandpa became a professor and a preacher. He had no seminary, no education. Yeah. He was a mean drunk who worked for the phone company. He would climb those poles to do repair on the telephone poles. Yeah. And then when he converted to this fundamental Baptist culture, he became a really mean soul winner. But he made a promise to God on the day of his conversion that he would go, they call it, have you heard of soul winning?
No, I was going to ask you, what is soul winning?
Yeah. Wow. Isn't that a wild term? Yeah, soul winning. Soul winning is a big thing, at least in that like fundamentalist Baptist culture, where it's basically knocking on doors and getting people to repeat the sinner's prayer after you. And then you write their name down in your notebook and you turn in their name at church for credit for you have to be winning so many souls, for, and
because like if they say those words somehow it saves them in heaven, and so you're saving them from damnation. Kind of thing?
You get that name in the book of life, so that when you walk up to the pearly gates, Peter gonna look up and be like, "Got you right here," because Carl Laurent had you say the magic words in Hammond, Indiana, when he came to your door. And man, I used to go with him. He was always he was one of those guys, my grandpa, that like, if he smelled weakness, he would know right where to get you, And I think something in me as a really highly sensitive kid who was also really like, I had a real like strong will streak in me. So when I would recognize that in someone, I would do this power up thing. And so I think there was something about me that he kind of respected that, and he wouldn't like go in on me the way he would my siblings. I would watch him like intentionally hurt their feelings, insult them and scare them and stuff. And he wouldn't do that to me. I mean, we would get in fights. I would challenge him when we would talk and stuff. But like, I remember I used to go soul winning with him on purpose, which I hated. I hated doing it. But I would go because, I don't know, maybe something in me was curious, but mostly I just wanted a relationship with him. And I was like, this is the way to be with him. What he would do was he would bring my grandma, they would come for the grandma and grandpa visit to our house, and he would pull up, walk in the door. We would all have to put on long dresses, cover up our legs. And it couldn't be, one time I messed up. I put on a jean skirt and I ran out to the car. I took off my summertime shorts, and I put on a jean skirt because that's, he'll approve of that. He wouldn't talk to me if I, wasn't in a dress. And he looked at my dress, and I tried to hug him in the driveway, and he wouldn't hug me. And I started like pulling on my jean skirt, like wondering what I did wrong. And he eventually told me when I asked him, he was like, "Denim is the devil's fabric." And I was like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Why is that?" And he was like, "'Cause it's designed to show what you got in the front and the back." Ooh. And I'm like, I remember the time being like, whoa. And then later thinking about it, I'm like, you perv. You're looking at the front too, buddy? What are you looking at? You're looking at the, I wonder if there's some like weird gay repression in there with him or something. I don't know. Or self-hatred or something, but, and he would deposit his wife, my grandma, in a easy chair in our house, and he would go back out and get in the car and go to the local, nursing home. He went to nursing homes because it's just like shooting fish in a barrel. Like to do the soul thing. To do the soul winning, he would knock on their door. He'd check the nameplate at the door. "Ruby, how you doing today, Ruby? My name's Carl, and I got a question for you. $64,000 question. If you died today, Ruby," and she's shaking with pleasure at having a visitor. She's so lonely. She's so excited somebody's talking to her. This handsome man in wingtips and a cheap suit and Brill cream hair walks in and is talking to her and holding her hands, and she's already crying. And I'm just watching all this, and he'd be like, "Yeah, $64,000 question, Ruby. If you died today, would you go upstairs or would you go to the bad place?" This woman's got one foot in the grave, one foot on a banana peel. And so she's, of course, just like, "I want to go to the good place," And so he would be like, "Why don't you repeat this prayer after me?" She'd repeat it, write it down. "See you later, Ruby." And walk out, check the name plate at this door. "James, how you doing today, James? My name's Carl, and I got a question for you."
Wow.
And one time I saw him get in a fist fight with a Catholic. His church thought Catholics were wolves in sheep's clothing, and he was trying to soul win a Catholic guy, and this old man got cantankerous, tried to punch him, and like fell out of his wheelchair forward. And so I was like, "Whoa, Grandpa!" And no shit, one time I went with him 2 days in a row, and he hit the same dementia ward 2 days in a row. I'm like, that doesn't count, man.
That's awesome.
But he kept his promise to God that day, at least, even if it was the same souls. But those people didn't know.
That kind of has the same vibe as proxy work for the dead. It's just kind of like this this is a Mormon practice, but Jen, tell me, it's just like this superficial ordinance where you got to win the souls, and it's kind of rote and mechanic, and you just got to get it done, and on to the next, and on to the next, and how many can you rack up?
Yeah.
I don't know if
and then you'll never get to all of them, as you can watch John Larson's episode, but you'll never get to all of them. So
but it reminds me of a Mormon practice of just like soul winning through baptizing dead people. It's not totally dissimilar.
Wow.
I don't expect you to process that.
No, that's
real time, but
that's fascinating.
Anyway, is
it also based in snatching souls out of hell and getting them into heaven?
Yeah. Like if you die, the theology is if you die without being baptized Mormon, right, with the right authority, then you go in heaven. Your spirit goes to a place called spirit prison, and it's just there. It's kind of like a Catholic version of limbo or whatever it's called.
Purgatory.
And then you're waiting because you haven't gotten a baptism yet and a confirmation that counts. But if a Mormon goes into a temple and gets baptized in your name, in your literal name, then you can accept that baptism in spirit prison. And then once you accept that baptism and confirmation, you get to move on and you get to go to heaven. But it's an interpretation of the Bible that says, except you're born of the water and the spirit, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. Mormons interpret that to mean a literal Mormon baptism and confirmation. But you go to the Mormon temple and it's like, you sit there in the font with a Mormon guy in a white jumpsuit and you're literally in the water in a baptismal font.
Yeah.
And he's like, Holly Laurent, having been commissioned of Jesus Christ, I baptize you in the name of Jose Guadalupe, who is dead, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And then you get baptized. But then it's like, Holly Laurent, having been commissioned of Christ, I baptize you in the name of Maria Guadalupe Hidalgo, who is dead, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. And it's like these rote rituals are somehow going to save somebody. Does this sound familiar?
Yeah, dog. So when you're in...
Ours are way more complicated. We have to have the baptismal font and everything. They just can go up to the door.
Yeah, you just have to get them to recite some little thing,
the
right?
sentence.
Your grandpa just got him to recite some little thing. Yeah. What were you going to say?
But it's so funny because when you hear someone else's, the specificity of someone else's belief system always sounds so like, this is clearly bananas, right? But like that's what all of them sound. But when it's yours, you don't hear it at the time. You don't hear it until you do.
Yeah.
But I heard that recently with Margaret Atwood. Somebody was asking Margaret Atwood about Elizabeth, what's her name? Moss, who played the girl in Gilead. Because Margaret Atwood wrote
The Handmaid's Tale.
Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
And the woman playing the lead in The Handmaid's Tale is a Scientologist. And so they were asking Margaret Atwood, how do you feel about that or whatever? And she was like, well, it's, of course, Scientology sounds absolute, but it's like bonkers.
Yeah.
But she goes, compared to what?
Yeah.
Like, if you listen to any of them, it's like, like ours is a talking snake. How did it talk? It doesn't have mandibles. It's like, okay. But my question is, okay, so if you're in prison, can you, like in human life prison, you can like write letters to the governor, try to get off death row, whatever. Can they contact anyone from there? Or it's just like if someone has the thought to go get baptized for them?
So if I'm playing the role of a Mormon, it'd be like, we don't totally understand all things. We don't know. But
they told me there's missionaries. In heaven, there's missionaries.
Receiving the discussion.
And they go down to prison and they'll give them the missionary discussions that they do.
But Holly, aren't you asking if they in spirit prison can come visit us in
or can they get any message of like, I'm in prison, y'all. give me a dunk.
So yeah, in Mormon theology, there are stories in Mormon mythology. There are stories of like someone's a Mormon is like sleeping and they have a dream, and it's their great grandma who comes to them in the dream and says, "Do my work for me."
So
but that's not like in the mainstream Mormon zeitgeist.
Yeah.
That the spirits in spirit prison are constantly coming, but it can happen.
And is it like prison? Do you need food?
It's probably Gucci, but it's spirits. You don't ask too many questions is what the church would always say. You're asking too many questions. It gets you in trouble.
Does that have a title? Somebody who asks too many questions? Are they called something?
It's called, someone who could be an apostate. You know what I mean? Like a skeptic.
Yeah.
A doubter.
Waste of time.
Dangerous. What's that?
I said waste of time.
Waste of time.
Some missionaries if they are asking too many questions.
This stuff is fascinating. It completely fascinates me.
Okay, but back to you.
Yeah.
So your grandpa and grandma are kind of your paternal and maternal grandparents are kind of hardcore Christians at some point.
They became cultish in their fundamentalism. Yeah.
And so you're raised by hippy dippy Christian parents that were still kind of purity culture.
Very
parents.
purity culture.
So let's talk about your upbringing by your hippy dippy Christian purity culture parents.
My mom, I think was a little bit sheltered, and her parents were, her dad was a Northern Baptist seminary trained preacher, and he was the preacher of the First Baptist Church of Niles, Michigan, and we lived in Niles, Michigan. So I went to First Baptist Church of Niles, Michigan, where my grandpa was the preacher, and he baptized me when I was 12, and all of that.
So your grandpa was the preacher. Your mom's dad was the preacher.
Yeah, of our church
you were baptized into.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was a really lovely man. He was he had the good stuff. He had I don't know if you're familiar with the fruits of the Spirit.
We want to hear all about it.
So in the New Testament, do you mean charismatic kind of Pentecostal kind of stuff? Speaking in tongues and... No, I was always scared of Pentecostals.
Okay.
They really scared me. I had a Pentecostal babysitter for a while, and when my parents would be out of town for long trips, she would take us to her church, and I would get so scared because they'd be speaking in tongues, being slain in the Spirit, all that stuff. And our church was very like, you come in, you sit in the pew, you sing the hymn, you listen to the sermon, But
Pentecostals would call speaking in tongues one of the gifts of the Spirit. So I'm curious what you meant when you
the fruit of the Spirit.
Oh, fruit of the Spirit.
Biblically is that if you have the Spirit of God inside of you, you will bear certain fruits in your life, and those fruits are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control.
Yeah. Ooh.
And so
say those slowly again.
Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control.
Self-control.
It's like that's like the Boy Scouts. Have you ever heard the Boy Scouts?
Trustworthy, trustworthy, loyal, patient, virtuous, thrifty, kind, clean, reverent. Yeah.
So those fruits of the Spirit were those were falling off my grandpa's tree. My mom's dad. He was very kind. He was a very lovely person. And so I grew up with him as the pastor, but he kind of had a hard time with my mom marrying this, like my dad, he looked like a 70s, like, that like Burt Reynolds or that kind of like porn star look of like, he's like tan, he's got the mustache, he's got the great hair. And my dad is like funny and he's a storyteller and he's a great speaker and communicator. And so so my parents, from the time I was born, my early years were all about my parents' band. They had a band called the Good News Circle, and they wrote and recorded a lot of albums, and they got quite a following. And they started out, they were one of the first ever Christian rock bands, and they started out playing like high school assemblies and county fairs to eventually stadiums. Like they opened up for Billy Graham in a Billy Graham crusade at Texas A&M University.
Wow.
And the reason I know that is because if you Google the Good News Circle, it's the first thing that comes up, and you can watch this video of them being like, "Welcome to Texas A&M University with Reverend Billy Graham. First, we're going to hear these lovely kids from Chicago who are going to sing a song to us called I Just Want to Talk About Jesus." And my dad's up there in a plaid-on-plaid leisure suit, you know, and
we're going to include that in the show notes. Jen's already looking it up.
Good. So, they were making albums. They ended up with an office and where they had a newsletter going out to their fans, and they're like Dove Award-winning albums on the wall. And
did your dad, was he lead singer? Did he play guitar? Was your mom in the band?
Yeah, my mom played piano and backup singing, and my dad played guitar, and he was lead, but the lead would sort of switch between a few guys depending on the songs.
Okay.
But he would write a lot of the music, and they put out these albums. And so my earliest memories are of sort of being backstage, feeling that subwoofer, like the beat in my body, you know, of being behind the wedges and all the sound stuff, and sitting on hard folding chairs, or like falling asleep on the floor, like during concerts, and or like running off my brother and I have a brother that's 2 years older than me, and we would kind of like, when my parents got on stage, we'd take off and go look for like change and try to find ice cream, and it's funny. In the 70s and 80s, nobody knew where their kids were any time. Now, like, they actually have like leashes on kids, or they're chipping. Like, my dog has a chip. Maybe people are going to start chipping their kids.
What ages were your parents like running a rock band? Like, and other siblings? How many siblings?
Yeah,
and your birth order, like all that?
I'm the second of four.
Okay, wow.
I have a big brother and I have two little sisters. Okay. And I think in my early years, I'd say the first, 5, 6, 7 years of my life, it was mostly just, half the time being home with my mom, half the time being on the road with all of them. Eventually my mom came off the road because she was having more kids. She actually had 5 pregnancies. The child after me didn't make it. And that was really hard on them. Oof. But it's funny. I grew up he only lived for a few hours. He was born at maybe she was 6 months pregnant. He probably would have survived today, but they just didn't have the technology. He was in an incubator. My dad said he could hold him in his hand. He was so small, and he would have probably been blind and he wasn't fully developed, and he didn't make it. But they had, a little casket and a funeral. And I grew up going to my brother's grave, and the stone, his gravestone says Joshua David Laurent, August 22nd, 1976, Jesus is Lord. That's all it says. And I remember always just looking at that and being like, Jesus is Lord on the grave of a dead baby is intense, man. I think the incredible pain of that experience just drove them even deeper into the perfect loving arms of a comforting Heavenly Father. And so they, on the very grave of their dead child, they declare that Jesus is Lord. It's intense. Yeah. And but my dad too, I think my dad's father was so unkind to him and hurt him so deeply and made him have such a crushing low self-esteem and self-loathing and all of that, the idea, when my dad got bit by that idea of a Heavenly Father who perfectly loves you, I mean, that's there was no going back from that.
It's like a replacement father that's loving.
That he needed that, and that gave him what he needed. And so
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So let's just say from 0 to 13, how was Christianity practiced in your home? So not most evangelical Christians' parents growing up weren't in a rock band, but what did a Christian life mean to your family? Let's just say from 0 to 13 years old. And then we'll talk about high school as kind of its own thing.
Yeah.
But how did Christianity manifest itself in your family?
Such a great question.
What were the practices?
it was very important to always be in church. You had to be there physically.
Every Sunday?
Oh yeah. Keeping up appearances, you know, and praying before every meal. We would, my parents would bring people, like pick up hitchhikers a lot and try to save them, bring Moonies home and like feed them. And like a lot of times we would have people at dinner. As a kid, I'd just be like, there's some new stranger sitting at dinner. And my parents were, you know, evangelizing them and trying to, you know, in their minds, they were like, we are holding the truth that can save the world. And if we don't reach out to every person we can, to try to share that love with them, to change their life, and also get them out of a gnashing teeth eternity of eternal torment, which, I mean, let's talk about that. Like, annihilation would be compassionate. We got to be in eternal torture. But, so yeah, people showing up at our table, a lot of like daily devotions, and it was just all we talked about. Everything was this dualism of heaven, hell, Jesus, Satan, angels, demons. I mean, I grew up with all the adults in my life telling me to my face, as a very sensitive kid, telling me to my face that there are very real invisible demons surrounding us all the time, like seeking to like bring us down and destroy us. And I mean, I would lay in bed and I would get to the point where I would envision them. I would have like, you know, have you ever had like a sleep paralysis nightmare where you're like, I'm not asleep, but I'm not awake and I can't move and I can't talk or whatever, where I would like swirling, like where the sky would start to swirl above me like Ghostbusters, and a demon would like fly down. Its whole hand would be bigger than my body and it would just put a talon in my mouth. And I thought that's why I couldn't talk, is I was under demonic attack because I watched people at my dad's shows a lot of times. Like my dad would go be like the chaplain at a summer Christian youth camp, and he would be leading praise and worship, and then he would give this like powerful message. And what I saw happen a lot as a kid was people would be possessed by demons. Their eyes would roll back in their head. They would start foaming at the mouth and shaking uncontrollably and you'd hear the demon like gutturally, like moaning out of them. And my dad would run over, place a hand on them and lift a hand to the sky and say, in the powerful name of Jesus, I cast you out. You have no place here. And supposedly, according to the Bible, demons hate the name of Jesus. They cannot abide by it. They hate it and have to get the hell out if you say the name of Jesus. And so I mean, John, it took me well into adulthood to be like, oh, at rock shows with lights and crowds and whatever, epileptic people have seizures that are followed, that are where your eyes roll back in your head and you have guttural noises and you're violently shaking. Oh my goodness. But like it being so real to me and me being really creative and imaginative, like I would, in sleep paralysis things, I would be like, I'm under demonic attack. And I would see these things that was probably just a nightmare, but I thought it was very real. And so the fear in me was so deeply soul crushing. I really struggled. And then there's also a thing in, I mentioned earlier that I always felt like a black sheep. And the thing that really scared me is there's this thing in evangelical, I don't know if it's like Calvinism, if it's like Augustine, how do you say? But are you familiar with predestination?
Yeah.
Do you have predestination?
No.
Not you, but does Mormonism?
No, Joseph Smith would have been down on predestination.
So I got a hold of that ideology and then became very afraid because I was like, oh no, that's why I can't find the Jesus gear in my shifter. I'm not predestined. And I was put into a Christian family. And so I've been exposed to the truth of the gospel, and it doesn't matter because I'm not holding the right ticket to get into the, at the deli. They're never going to call my number because I'm not predestined. All of these these ideologies that when I latched into them, man, it really messed with me. And
can we do a quick theological inventory? Because I just want to ask you a bunch of theological questions of what your worldview was religiously in your childhood. Is that okay?
I'd love to.
Okay. I'm going to just say some ideas or words, and you just tell me, as you're a kid growing up, how you would have described that idea or concept.
I love it.
Okay. So God, what was God to you growing up as an evangelical Christian?
The all-powerful, divine creator of the universe, who loves us deeply. Okay. And who is so, but our sin problem disgusts him so that the very nature of our existence, being sinful, is it tarnishes the good things of God. And so God had to create a path for us to be able to be redeemed and be with him because he loves us so much. He wants us with him, but we can't be with him with sin.
And if you were to kind of describe God's personality type, well, first of all, was God a man? Was he male?
Definitely.
Super male?
Oh, yeah.
And did God have a body?
Well, yeah, because we're made in his image. So it's got to be kind of like this. It's anthropomorphized.
Okay.
I think. But also no, it's big and invisible and everywhere all at once.
Okay. And then what was God's personality?
A loving, perfect father.
Okay.
Who only wants what's best for us, but cannot abide by our sin problem. So he's got to kill his kid or sort of kill himself. But here's that question is interesting, John, because two things exist with the God of the Bible that I was raised with. One is perfect, loving Heavenly Father who will sacrifice dearly to redeem you and restore you and be in a perfect, beautiful relationship with you. And then there's also this warlike God who is vengeful and murderous. Lot's wife just turned to look back at the home that she loved, and he turned her into a pillar of salt. He cast Adam and Eve out when they disobeyed him. So when you think of a perfect loving relationship, you don't ask someone you love and trust to obey you. You don't ask your wife to obey you, but obedience is a big thing. And with the personality of this God, if you don't obey and get in line, you will be cast out. So there's not a lot of, for as much as the message is about reconciliation, restoration, there's also time and time again in the Bible. He cast Adam and Eve out of the garden when they disobeyed. He cast Lucifer out of heaven when Lucifer disobeyed. He cast the people of Israel to wander in the desert for 40 years when they disobeyed. It's very, and he has an angel of death somehow that goes around Egypt and kills all the firstborn babies. That. How do I hold that with perfect, loving Heavenly Father? And also, but I do have an angel of death, and also think about the way we treat, mothers. If a mother had a child and put that baby into a little cradle and then threw a bunch of straight edge razors in there, we would lock her up and throw away the key. But God put Adam and Eve, his perfect creation that he loved so much, in this garden and then put a death tree in there. Why is that in there? This is what I would always drive my Sunday school teachers crazy because I was always like, wait, why does God need Abraham to kill his kid to prove his love to him? Why, and they would, but there's an answer for everything,
Because what I think I hear you saying is that God is simultaneously all loving and compassionate and kind, but super judgmental, harsh, vindictive as well. It's almost like a bipolar personality where he can love you better than anyone, but damn you to hell, both.
Yeah.
So which is it? Is it both?
So there's such cognitive dissonance in it. And evangelicals will love to tell you all the time that like the God of the Bible and this belief system like is not mental gymnastics. It is not intellectual suicide. That is a big thing. And I'm like, how so?
Well, what's most important is how you experience God as a kid. So you're a kid and you're trying to reconcile an Abrahamic God that basically asks a dad to stab his child.
Right.
And even if he says, no, don't worry, just kidding, you don't have to do it. If someone did that in real life, that would be viewed as horrific parental abuse.
Right.
So there's that kind of dad. And then there's like loving, kind,
right,
knows you personally and cares about you.
And the kindness and the goodness and the love is shown in the person of Jesus, right? That God poured himself. Sometimes I like to take away it makes it more interesting and like sticky to me to replace he with it, because I think it helps us get to other like interesting like ideas of consciousness and the nature of reality and what might be going on here. But
right now you're a 12-year-old Christian girl.
Yeah. And I always asked all those questions of like, cool. He loves me so much. I've never experienced any kind of love like this. That is the thing that makes the world go round. But also, if I don't love and obey him and dedicate my life and loyalty to him, he's gonna torture me for eternity. Because the beautiful person of Jesus part, self-sacrifice, redemption, giving of your life, creating a way to be together. The only way that's possible is like blood has to be shed. Like, so because, wait, so God's making the rules, right? Yes. God made everything, right? Yes. So God made a hell? Why would God make a hell? Also, okay.
This is sounding so super familiar.
So God made everything. So God made the rules. So God must have known that we were going to sin. God put a death tree in there. He set us up to disobey. And then now that our disobedience, the very nature of our sin condition is so detestable to him that somebody's got to die. That has to be the way we redeem, is through blood. Like if I was like, John, you have disappointed me so much, I'm going to kill your friend. It's like, you'd be like, you're a psychopath. Like we lock people up who, so all that cognitive dissonance.
I have a question though.
Yeah.
Okay. Because in Mormonism, Joseph Smith evolved to God and Jesus being literally two totally separate beings.
Ooh.
That Jesus is literally the Son of God, just like we're children of God. And so God and Jesus weren't one. They're not in Mormonism.
Is Jesus God in Mormonism?
So Jesus has God's superpowers, but Jesus is the Son of God. So God, I mean, this is Mormon theology, and I'd rather focus on your story, but like God maybe was a human like us in some other existence, but was super righteous, and so graduated to become a God. And then God had a bunch of spirit children. Jesus was the first of 50 billion spirit children.
Wow.
And then, so we're brothers and sisters with Jesus as children of God. And then Jesus, as an independent being, was God's chosen child to be sent to earth to be sacrificed for the rest of us. But what I was going to say is, in your theology, God's kind of killing himself, because if God and Jesus are really the same thing in your Christian theology, then it almost seems less barbaric, because in our theology, it's like Abraham literally, God as Abraham literally killed his child being Jesus.
Right.
In your theology, God's this superhero that can be in multiple places at once, where he just kind of amoebatizes a part of himself, sends that down as Jesus. Jesus gets killed, but Jesus is God. So why is that even a bad thing or a sacrifice? And then Jesus goes right back up and amoebatizes back into God. Is that even like a tragic thing? Like if I was teenage you, I would have been like, how is that really a sacrifice if God is just kind of harming himself a little bit, but then like it.
Right.
So, I mean, anyway, but in your mind, it was still a violent act, even though God was kind of doing it to himself. This is how my Christian Mormon brain would have worked.
This is fascinating to me. And And the story of Jesus' death is presented to us as just the most beautiful thing of like, it is the ultimate representation of love, is that you would give your life, but do both of those come from, because the Greeks had previously, their gods started to have sex with like Zeus would have sex with a human woman, and then there would be a son of that god. So the Greeks predated us, and they had sons of God. So then we're like, oh, we have a son of God too? I mean, is that kind of where?
Yeah. Some would say Christianity is just it is like remix.
Yeah.
Christianity is just a remix of earlier form.
Yeah.
Even a lot of Christ's teachings about like being in the present moment.
Yeah.
Some people say is Buddhism just mixed in with Greek mythology and a lot of the even pagan stuff. It's kind of a remix. Everything is remix.
Everything is, right?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me, John, because it makes me think like, coming from the tradition I come from, one of my biggest problems with it is that it's taken literally, because we do keep making these stories. It keeps evolving. These stories that humans are telling as storytelling creatures. We've been telling these stories for all these centuries, and it morphs and it morphs and it morphs. It's a big game of telephone, but it's religion. And always at the point you're currently at, it has reached its perfect apex of truth. We are so lucky that we, here in the Midwest of America, on this little blue dot in the cosmos, we are holding the one truth, But what's interesting to me is if you don't take it literally and you listen to the evolving stories that all of these humans have been telling from all of them that we know of recorded history, whether it's like Tibetan Buddhism, Mormonism, Scientology, Evangelical Christianity, fundamentalism, Islam, all the, if you look at all those stories and don't take them as literal, but take like, what is the meaning that we're trying to communicate? There might be something really, really valuable there. Right. And you might be able to like put them all together and actually make some connections that start to like work and make sense.
Yeah.
But what we do is we get hung up on the like, what if there is something, and let's call that thing God?
We're going to come to this. This is how we're going to end.
What if? Okay, I'm getting there too fast. Sorry.
No, we're going to get there.
Into the planet to have a material experience. And what if we're talking about us?
No, I didn't mean to. What I like to do is kind of follow the chronology and then kind of like see where we are today. But I love that thinking. And can we promise, Jen, can we make a note? Mm-hmm. I want to come back to that. Mm-hmm. But I want to focus on what you were experiencing in those moments.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out whether your conception of God and Jesus, Jesus' sacrifice, it doesn't sound so tragic and violent to me if God's doing it to himself.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
But how did you think of it when you were taught your Christology?
Like that, like you're saying, of like, wow. I mean, he loves us that much that, wow, it's this beautiful, he laid down his life, his own life,
God's life. So you saw it as Jesus as a manifestation of God laying down his own life for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was wondering if God's a superhero, does he really feel pain like us? Is it really a sacrifice if he gets to be a God anyway before and after?
And is it death if he comes back?
Right.
And that's.
But were these thoughts you were having? I'm not trying to project me back into yours.
I don't think I was. Now, in adulthood, I've started to, but then, as a kid, you believe what you're told.
Yeah.
And I was hook, line, and sinker, man.
So what were your feelings for Jesus?
I wanted so badly to get it right and to be in this most meaningful, beautiful relationship with him. But honestly, it never made sense to me.
What relationship were you told you should have with Jesus that you were striving for?
I think that's the problem, is the word relationship. Because as a kid, and maybe that was part of me being like, I'm doing it wrong. Because like, to me, a relationship was with a friend or a parent or my grandpa. A relationship was that I'd go ride his riding lawnmower with my grandpa when he was cutting the grass. How do I do that with Jesus?
But when you say doing it wrong, what were you trying to do, or what was in your mind doing it right based on the perception other religious people had given you?
Maybe liking it. I didn't like it. I was like, we were supposed to do our devotions. We were supposed to like pray all the time. I think the relationship. Did
you pray to Jesus or God?
A lot of times as a kid, we would begin prayers by saying, "Dear Jesus."
Okay. So you're praying to Jesus. That's very personal.
But that's also God. So it gets tricky, but it's I think, you know how we still do this all the time. You look around and everybody seems to have it together and to be fine. And then when you talk to a person individually, they don't have it together and they're not fine. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess it's okay that I don't have it together and I'm not fine either. But we just always imagine everyone else's. So I was doing that with Christianity. I was looking and I was like, everyone's feeling these songs and they're feeling this love for Jesus and they're feeling that connection almost like, it's almost like now, like with cannabis, your consciousness can be like, here is my mood, my day, me right now. I want to change it. And you're distinctly like immediately in your mind, you're like, and now I am like I am different. And there's something I like about that is distinct. It's like a switch. I am sober, I am high. And I think what I was doing is I was looking at them and I was like, I'm sober and they're all high. And I can't figure out how to click into that thing that they're doing. Because I don't want to be here. I don't like these songs. I don't like these stories. I don't like praying. It doesn't feel like a relationship to me. Talking to an invisible boyfriend, which is what you're selling me, is supposed to give me the greatest peace, joy, and comfort of my life. It ain't working.
Yeah.
And so I just was like,
Okay.
And, man, that's such a good question, John. I don't think I've ever I'm a verbal processor, and that helped me even make some sense of my childhood.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Let's keep going. Okay. So what was the Holy Ghost? What did that mean to you as a Christian, as a kid, as a teen? Was that even a part of it? The Holy Spirit?
Big time.
What was the Holy Spirit? What was its role? What did it do?
The Trinity is very important, though it does not appear in the Bible. The Holy Spirit is the third part of the Trinity. I don't know in what century that became like a Christian doctrine, but they pieced together verses that sort of referenced in the upper room, these flames came over the disciples' heads and they began speaking in an unknown tongue and la la la, and that was the Holy Spirit speaking through them or whatever. So even though the title, the Trinity, doesn't exist in the Bible, also so many things don't exist in the Bible that the church sort of references as if it's in the Bible, but it's not, like heaven is not in the Bible. The time in which Jesus lived, they had no concept of a soul. That's a newer idea. So when Jesus talked about the kingdom of heaven, he was talking about a community on earth. He was talking about still being in space and time. So wait, now what were we talking about?
So the Holy Spirit, what was the role of the Holy Spirit?
So the Holy Spirit became, is the third member of the Trinity. The Trinity is a very important doctrine in Christianity and, or in evangelical Christianity. And, the Holy Spirit, it's so hard to describe. It's actually like, the way we were taught it is that it's, water vapor and ice are all the same H2O, but they're in different forms. And that's how, the H2O doesn't change. You can drink it in this form, you can crunch it up and eat it in this form, or you can inhale it in this form. But it's always the same. And so, so I guess God is water, Jesus is ice, and the Holy Spirit is vapor. It's so hard to say what it is. But the way I was told it as a kid is that, and that's why those scary people would be speaking in tongues, was because they would open themselves up to the Holy Spirit, who gives them what's called a prayer language, and where they're just going like hamina hamina, Orobakosheka, and that is the Holy Spirit speaking through them because their personal spirit is unable to express its own love for the Creator God adequately, and so the Holy Spirit comes into you and speaks it for you, through you, in this like unknown language. And the Holy Spirit also is sort of like a bonding agent that makes us all love each other, and we're all Christian brothers and sisters in Christ, and the Holy Spirit is the one bonding us. The Holy Spirit is also the way you would describe intuition. The Holy Spirit is the one giving you that idea. The Holy Spirit will tell you, will put things on your heart to pray about, to confess, to go visit that lonely person. The Holy Spirit is the one telling you that. Yeah. It's sort of like God's emails, I guess.
That's good.
I got an email from the Lord.
What was the Holy Bible to you?
The book that God gave us to explain all of the nature of reality, where we came from, what it's all about, and where we're going. It's the ultimate truth. It was God breathed. So even though it was written by human beings, God was doing it through them. And everything we need to know is in there. And it is completely, it is a sacred text. It is not to be taken lightly. It's not to be dismissed, and it's not to be touched or added to or anything. It's meant to be taken literally. It's perfect.
So it was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Inerrant.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the inerrancy of the gospel is something, it is stated in Timothy, in the book of First Timothy, that the book is inerrant and blah, blah, blah. But the funny thing about that is they read that, Christians read that verse and apply it to the entire Bible. But that like wasn't canonized till like, centuries and centuries and centuries later. And that writer could only have been talking about the one letter he was writing.
Right.
Because he didn't have any idea.
They didn't all get put together until later.
He didn't have an idea of those 64 books and the canonization of what we now say is like the perfect God-breathed holy text.
Age of the earth.
Age?
How old was the earth?
When you were growing on, let's say if most people live to be almost 100, then we could say that it's like there have been 20 or 30 generations of humans on this planet, just over 2,000 years ago. I mean,
that Jesus came 2,000 years ago?
I guess Jesus came 2,000 years ago, and just a little bit before that, God made the entire universe and everything in it.
So literal Garden of Eden, literal Adam and Eve.
We all came from them. And I always was like, wait, but now that you told me what sex is, who was boning to make offspring? Adam and Eve's sibling? Adam and Eve's children?
Because Adam and Eve's children would have had to engage in incest.
Yeah, I would always ask that. Yeah, I would always, in Sunday school, I'd be like, wait, Adam and Eve's kids were all having sex with each other and making children? But that's the only way it could possibly be.
What was the answer to that?
And then also Noah's kids. It had to have happened again. Noah's.
What would the answer have been to that question?
Shut up. Shut up.
What would it have been?
Shut up, you dumb bitch. No, it would have been, gosh, I mean, I asked it so many times. What did they say? The answer for that, for those tricky ones, was always, it was like a different thing back then. It was different. It was like they were able to, in the same way God was able to inseminate Mary with a baby without any, contact taking place or whatever. In that same way, he can also, make it not have been that the brothers and sisters were banging. Okay. I'm like, okay.
Noah and the flood.
Yeah.
What was the view on that? Global flood, two of every animal in the boat.
Yep. It was a cute, darling, lovely story of how much God, the twist, the spin of how much he loves us, that he would save us, is like, wait, hold on. Genocide of the entire planet and everything in it, all the species, everywhere except for, I guess, sea creatures probably did fine, but everything else died. Like, and like everything, like mosquitoes, tigers. I have to kill everything in existence because I'm not getting worshipped and obeyed. It wasn't looked at like that mass genocide. It was looked at like God had to clean house. This happens from time to time. He had to, the world had become so wicked that he had to destroy everyone in the whole planet except there was one righteous man and his family. They went on the boat, and then it was so cute. The animals came on 2 by 2, and 2 zebras, 2 giraffes. And I love now to this day to, like, I was just recently talking to a Christian who was real Trumpy, and I was like, oh, let's have a little fun. And because he kept telling me that he had just been to the Creation Museum. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
And he said
Kansas? Where is it?
He's somewhere, Kentucky, Tennessee, something.
Okay.
And they have, from the measurements in the Bible, they have recreated an actual ark built in proportion to the cubits that are mentioned. And it's like however long, and it's however many stories high, and you can walk through it and everything. And this guy was telling me about having been there and about how amazing it was. And just imagine that, like, the tigers wouldn't even like eat the sheep because the tigers, the Holy Spirit, I was also told this, the Holy Spirit came into all the animals so that they wouldn't eat each other. And that also, I was told in my Christian school in a science class, I was told that the way God flooded the whole earth is that the planet Earth at that time had a water canopy in the atmosphere that completely surrounded the sphere of the planet, a layer of water in the atmosphere. And it created a greenhouse effect. And so everything on Earth was really like lush and stuff, where it was like warm and mild, and it was perfect conditions for people like T-Rexes and brontosauruses and stuff. And when the two and so the way God destroyed the earth is that he collapsed the water canopy to flood the whole earth like that.
That's where the water came from.
Yeah, and that's how you could flood an entire planet in the cosmos at the same time.
Okay.
Not even thinking that, like, wait, the Bronze Age tribal writers who wrote this, they thought the whole world was what they knew, which might have been 20-mile approximately, you know, like, and so there could have been a flood that killed a bunch of people in a little village, and they were like, the whole world was destroyed because that's all they knew.
That's their perspective, yeah.
So the
we just did an episode on the flood, Noah's flood, just a week or two ago. So we'll include that in the show notes for those.
Yeah.
Because what I was told is the brontosauruses got off the ark, and the environment of the planet Earth had changed so drastically.
The brontosauruses were on the ark?
Yes.
Wait, aren't brontosauruses bigger than an ark?
Yeah, probably.
How would they have fit?
I know.
If they're bigger than the boat.
But the two got off, and with no canopy around the earth anymore, there was no greenhouse effect, and so all the dinosaurs immediately died. And so that's why.
How'd they fit on the boat?
I know. And also, if there's no evolution, I always so this person was telling me about how
how was evolution viewed? When you were growing up,
as lies made up by scientists who hate God. And this guy, this Christian who was telling me about the Creation Museum and how powerful the experience on the ark was, he had a chocolate lab with him, cutest dog. And I kept looking at the dog, and I was like, "Were there 2 chocolate labs on the ark?" And he was like, "Well, yeah." And I was like, "2 yellow labs?" He was like, "Yeah." 2 black labs? Yep. I was like, "Were there 2 English bulldogs?" And he was like, "Of course." And I was like, they get there from England? England's an island. How'd those English bulldogs get to the Fertile Crescent? It was a long walk.
What about the kangaroos?
But that was an explanation for why, because I'm looking at your chocolate lab, and like, that's evolution. Your dog is actual evolution. Like, we genetically created that by using the laws of evolution. I'm like, no. Were there 2 Yorkshire Terriers on the ark?
All right. So, but a literal flood.
Oh yeah.
Growing up.
Yeah.
Okay. What was sin? What were the big sins that you were taught, or like, and there's kind of like sins that no one in the family should do, and then like really big sins. But how was sin described, and what sins were really emphasized in your family growing up?
It was don't smoke, don't drink, don't have sex.
So cigarettes, alcohol, and sex were sins.
Ooh, yeah. And I mean, the 10 Commandments, those are big ones. But the 3, the smoking, sex, and booze that's even, in terms of like the constantly like pounding it into my brain that they gave me. Sin is a condition that we are born with because of the curse, from Eve in the garden. Also, a great way to tell 51% of the Earth's population, all the females, that like, if you go for what you want and you go take what you want, you'll not only destroy your life, you'll destroy everyone's life for all time in the entire planet. Poor Eve. But it's a condition that we have that is, again, like we were talking about earlier, so detestable to God that it separates us from God because he's perfect, and sin tarnishes that perfection, and he can't be tarnished because he's perfect. So, but he wants to be in a relationship with us, so he has to wash us in blood and to sanctify us to be able to be with him in a relationship. And so sin is just this condition that we're born with because all humans are. And the only way to take care of that problem is to repent, to acknowledge that you are wrong, that you are bad, that you are shameful, and to repent and to throw yourself onto the mercy of the death of Jesus Christ to redeem you and wash away your sins so that you can be with God and not bring your sin problem along.
Okay, so you talked about that thing your grandpa did. I'm sorry.
Soul
winning. So like, did you have to win your own soul? Like, was there an idea of being saved? And if so, what did being saved meant? Not when you're trying to save someone in the old folks' home to get them to say the magic words, but like, how would, like, you're being raised in a Christian faith. How did you or family members become saved, if that was even a thing?
You have to literally say the prayer. So you have to, and the prayer I was given was, "Dear Jesus, please forgive me for every sin I ever committed. I believe that you died to save me. I believe in you. I devote my life to you. Forgive me for my sins. And I want to be in a relationship with you. I want to walk, with you and be with you forever someday in heaven."
Is this like written in a pamphlet somewhere?
Sometimes, yeah. Like you can get tracts, like people will pass out, like
for you,
little zines.
Those words you just said, were they literal, or was it a prayer you literally read, or was it?
We just heard it so much because we were also supposed to like tell other people, what to say. We learned it in Sunday school. And
do you do it like, is there a date and a time where you're like, I'm going to profess this?
Yeah.
And is it in front of the whole congregation?
It's usually like with your parents, or like for me, it was because they kind of say there's an age of accountability. And kind of when you reach that age where I think what it is just developmentally as a kid, you can understand it. So now you have a choice to make. Do you want to like be with God in heaven? Yes. Do you want to, be with Jesus? Do you believe Jesus died for your sins? Yes. Okay. So do you want to like say this prayer with me? Yes. And so then, and just like that, you are a Christian, and now you are saved from.
Do you remember when this happened to you?
I remember,
who was around? Like,
I would say it was really early. I probably did it in Sunday school or with my parents or my mom or something. I kind of have like a sensory memory of it, but I don't remember where I was. But the thing is, John, for me, the math never worked Because I was like, well, I did it, and so I'm saved. But also, then I sinned again or whatever. I remember like I would admire Catholics because I'd be like, oh, they can go to confession. I wanted that tangible thing, of like, I can go to confession, confess it, whew, I'm done. But I was afraid that even though I had said the sinner's prayer, that I would then do something so egregious or whatever, because there's also a belief within this belief system that you can't even think something, because if you think something to God, you have done it. So if I think about murdering you, like I've actually now committed the sin of murder. Mm-hmm. If I think about having sex with that person, to God, I've already done it. Mm-hmm. And so that math to me, like, destroyed me, because I was like, oh no. So what I did was I started doing it almost like a breathing thing all the time, because I would just all the time as a kid be like, dear Jesus, please forgive me for every sin I ever committed. I love you. I want to be with you forever. I would just do it all the time in case there was an indiscretion I forgot about or wasn't aware of or whatever, in case I got hit by a car, in case I died in my sleep. I was just always saying that prayer to try to cover if I'd done anything bad.
So I'm going to pull out my psychologist training for a second. Is that okay?
Love it.
Does the term scrupulosity mean anything to you?
No,
have you ever heard of that term before?
No.
So we talked in the car before, like as you're trying to heal from the trauma of your upbringing and process everything, there's a psychological condition called scrupulosity that is basically religious obsessive compulsive disorder. So I'm going to cue to your face, because this is a thing. When we think of OCD, we think of like arranging things or like cleaning things or washing your hands,
right?
Or hoarding,
licking the doorknob.
Yeah. There's a form of religious OCD where you're obsessed about purity or cleanliness or worthiness, and things like hyper confessing to an ecclesiastical leader, or hyper praying to God, or hyper reading the scriptures, or hyper ruminating, or even praying or reciting a prayer is a form of obsessive compulsive disorder. Wow. With a religious manifestation. And it sounds like you may have had that.
Whoa.
And this is not something I'm making up. This is a legitimate, American Psychological Association diagnosis.
Wow. That is, I'm so glad you told me that, because I'm going to go see, am I currently OCD? That would explain a lot of stuff. That's great. Yeah.
Because if you're so worried about your worthiness, that you're monitoring every potential bad thought,
right,
and then constantly, that's a ritual, right?
Right.
So OCD always has two parts. It has the obsessive thoughts,
yep,
safety or cleanliness or whatever. In your case, worthiness.
Yes. And
then the compulsive behavior that is hopefully going to neutralize the obsessive thoughts or the anxiety and so the hyper reciting of the sinner's prayer would be a compulsive ritual to neutralize your obsessive thoughts.
Wow. I'm so glad we're having this talk. That's fascinating, John. Wow. You
cared. It's not that you didn't care. See, this is the thing that I've learned. A lot of post-Mormons didn't leave the church because they cared too little, which is the stereotype. The stereotype in Mormonism is people leave Mormonism because they never really believed or they never really were committed, right? But what I found is a lot of the people that leave were taking it super seriously.
Yeah.
But they were like, everyone else seems happy, but I'm not. And I'm not just going to lie and fake it. I really want to feel what I'm supposed to be feeling.
Right.
And I really believe in this purity thing of like, pure thoughts. I want to have pure thoughts, but I keep having the bad thought. Oh, what do I do? And then you develop the compulsive behaviors.
Wow.
As a way to, so you care. It's not that you didn't care or were weak or uncommitted. It's that you cared so much. You were taking it so super seriously.
Yeah.
And it was causing you so much. And I'm not trying to project.
No, I really, really appreciate this. Because now, even as you're talking, I'm having more memories of, speaking of earlier, I said I would have sleep paralysis that I thought was a demonic attack. because of those things
you
happening to me.
You believed that the demons were real. You were taking it seriously.
And so I think I developed sleep disorders because what I started to do, because I knew demons hated the name of Jesus. And so all night long I would be like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I would be like, as long as I am saying Jesus, demons will peace out because they'll be like, ugh, we hate that name and can't be around it. And so I would try to not sleep and say Jesus all night long. And now my whole life I've had the most insane like sleep disorders and sleep problems. Holy smokes.
So maybe you had a little scrupulosity.
I'm going to have you write that word down for me later.
It's in the show notes.
I got it for you.
I actually did my for my psychology PhD. I did my master's thesis on the treatment of scrupulosity. So that's why I know a little bit about it. So.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I did my master's thesis on performers getting up in front of audiences to test their existence, to see like, do you see me? Do I exist?
Nice. Okay, so you were a conscientious kid really trying to take all this religion seriously and really trying to be pure and good.
I guess so, yeah. I tried. I tried so hard. And then I think, honestly, I got so beat down by the fear and now this scrupulosity? Scrupulosity?
Yeah.
Of my crushing OCD that I'm now discovering, that I just started to rebel. I mean, I tried.
Let's talk about your adolescence, though. So let's go to your adolescence.
Yeah.
I'm sure. What were the purity rules? So in Mormonism, it's like don't drink, don't smoke, don't do drugs, don't have sex, don't have bad thoughts, dress modestly. What were the
same.
What were the purity standards that you were trying to live up to? Be righteous, be pure, have a soft voice. You know, follow your gender roles. So what were yours?
100%. All those you said.
No. I didn't want to plant that.
It was. Wait. Let me think. Wait. Say the question again.
What were the purity standards and the religious standards you were trying to conform to as a teen? And then how did that go? And then what was the result of it maybe not going so well?
The purity culture was big. And that was really hard on me, man. Like,
what were the standards?
I think it was okay if you kissed a boy, had to be hetero. But it really should be like, maybe just like, you know, like a peck kind of smooching. Maybe you'd get into some of the tongue stuff, but be very careful. You know, like don't do that. It's probably better just to not even kiss. And of course, nothing past that.
What about dress?
Modest is hottest.
Meaning
maybe.
What? Miniskirts.
The
tank tops.
The role of a female is to protect the thoughts of the males. So we were told that like the way men are wired, they're more sexual, they're visual, they get turned on like visually, and so you have to hide anything you got. You know, we would still like have bathing suits in the summer and stuff, but
one piece, or were bikinis okay?
One piece.
Okay.
And, you know, I, of course, as soon as I was a teenager, I got a bikini and, you know, they did not like that. But I was like, I have a long torso. The one pieces go up my butt. I was like, I have to break it up. Long torso. But I mean, my dad, like when I got, you know, to be a teenager, I mean, my dad, like almost every single time I would walk in the door, my dad would go, still a virgin, still a virgin, still a virgin, still a virgin.
Are you joking or?
No, just checking in. Like,
no, like, tell me how he would actually.
He would do it kind of jokey. Yeah. Like he'd be like, oh, yeah, he's still a virgin. He would come over and smell me to see if I smelled smoky. It would be sort
when
of.
you'd go to a party or whatever?
Yeah. Okay. And he would hug me. I wondered if the hugging was a veiled just checking for cigarette smoke smell. But a lot of times when he would hug me, he would say, girls who get affection from their fathers don't sleep around. And I was always like, Dad, shut up. I'm like, let me go. I look back at that now in adulthood and I'm like, whoa, like to be constantly sexualized, you know, at that age too, when you're like so uncomfortable in your body, and my sexuality was such a constant conversation in my home in terms of like checking in on it, of like, and man, that like was very, very, very hard. And
how can it make it so you don't think about it all the time? If it's all your parents are...
I know, I'm like, you're clearly thinking about it all the time because you keep bringing it up to me all the time. Yeah. And
then they want you never to think about it when that's all they talk about or care about.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're getting horny, and that's so confusing and scary. And then, you know, you do start like kissing and it's funny, like to this day, I sometimes feel like in sexual scenarios, like I'll almost feel like my arms start to like go in front of me, like in an X, really like rigidly, where I'm like, whoa, it's just all this like muscle memory of like getting turned on and then like putting up the big barrier between me and him, of like, you know, and that was a thing too, of like, we can't, you know, you would smooch and get all like turned on, but you wouldn't do anything else. But then you'd kind of start like grinding on each other in your clothes and like, oh, I feel something there, you know? And then the like abject terror that would come after that, you know? It's like, we had our clothes on the whole time, you know, but like the guilt and shame and all that stuff. But like the way it played out for me in my home was just a lot about my sexual purity. My dad, he told all of us, and it was like honor system, but he had 3 girls, and it was really important to him that they stay sexually pure. And so he told all of us that if we had never been kissed by the time we were 16, he would buy us a car. So now, like, our purity is like being purchased, you know? I didn't make it. My baby sister did. And
I did that same thing to my daughter. I'm in confession.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Jenn camp confession. Yeah, I told one of my daughters I'd give her $500 if she didn't kiss anyone until she was
until 16. Mm-hmm. Wow. So this is ringing familiar to you, Jenn.
Yeah.
And I understand though, and it was always a little bit jokey, you know, you know, but I understand that because, you know, I think pregnancy destroyed the lives of so many women that they're just trying to protect us. Like, it will destroy your life if you get knocked up.
And you can't abort.
I was 18 when I got married and had my first baby.
Your skull wasn't completely hardened yet.
And I have 4 daughters. So like I kind of did the same thing, which I am not proud of right now, but I would like, I almost like, I don't know what the word is, but I would tell them, you know, no kissing until you're, I think I said 16. No kissing till you're 16. You can't go, only group dates until you're 18. Yeah. Something about like college, I forget what it is. But anyways, I had like rules and I was like, just follow these, you know, and then in my mind, I'm like, if they knock a couple years off of each of those, then they'll be okay.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm like, and I think it was me just like, I want you to go to college. I want you to live on your own. I want you, like all the things that I didn't get to do. I was trying to like make sure they got there.
But Jenn, thanks for sharing that. But for Mormons, it's more than that too. It's that, and I was going to ask you this, like in Mormonism, we're taught that premarital sex is a sin next to murder. So it's kind of like murder and premarital sex. So like for us, it's more than just like, don't want to have pregnancy. It's like, you're going to be doing something that's horrific in God's eyes. Yeah. What was it for you? If like, is your dad's not wanting you, is your dad's desperate that you marry a virgin?
Oh yeah.
What is he believing and what is he teaching you that would be the implications or the consequence of committing such a grievous sin? What would happen if you had premarital sex to God or in your faith? What would it mean?
You're damaged goods, you're, that was a gift you're supposed to save for your husband. God's idea of marriage, like now is you're thrown off track. You messed up the perfect plan. God has a plan, and you can't jump the rails, man, or you will have a worse life. You will suffer. You will end up with a guy with a shitty husband because a good and upright man isn't going to want to marry. We had youth group where
Finish that sentence.
A good and upright man isn't going to want to marry a slut or all that slut shaming. A girl who's like already given it away. So you're gonna end up with you're gonna have a lesser than life. You're gonna have a lesser than spouse, a lesser than life. Blah 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 blah. And in youth group, we would all often have these purity talks from our youth pastor at church and stuff. And they would do all these, they would give us all construction paper, fold it in half, cut a heart, open up the heart. And then, they would say if you kiss a boy, they're tearing a part off of your heart. And if you sleep with a boy, you're tearing a part off of your heart. And then, and also when guys have sex with girls, it dehumanizes the girl. She now has lost her precious power or whatever. And so you crumple up the construction paper. And so in the end, they're like, this is your heart and you're in terrible pain and no one will ever want you. And, yeah.
Can I just connect with you on this?
Yeah.
In Mormon culture, they would take a fresh stick of gum and then chew it up and say, well, this is you if you're a virgin.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm gonna chew it up, and this is you if you have premarital sex. So it's
fantastic.
basically that's what this is what they tell a woman.
Right. Yeah.
The men didn't kind of get
the
this
men
lesson.
did. Yeah, I was just gonna say that this is given to the women in young women's, or they would bake us all cupcakes and then they would lick off the frosting.
And then be like, eat this.
And then
that's what, if
this
you
is
have
what
sex before marriage.
That's what you are.
This is what you get to offer your future husband. You
You're
don't get to offer. You don't get to offer him
Right.
the one with the
Right.
sprinkles and the frosting and
Right.
the different things.
Right.
The really great yummy ones. No,
Right.
you offer him just like this cupcake that has nothing on that's been pulled apart.
Yeah.
And
And what we're saying is we got the same. We basically got the
totally.
same object lessons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just slightly modified,
and
right?
think about those lessons, man. I mean, I'm a chewed up piece of gum. I'm this complex,
Well, crumpled.
growing,
You were a
evolving-
crumpled
I
piece
was
of
crumpled
paper.
up piece of construction paper, of red paper. And
Why are we laughing?
at least
by the
you
way?
can be taped back together. I
talk
guess
about
maybe.
what do you
You can't
mean?
unchew the gum. You can't unlick the cupcake.
Right, exactly. But
But
also,
you can't uncrumple the paper. You can't.
Yeah.
It's still damn. It's still. Think about an uncrumpled piece of paper.
Jesus
It still
can
looks
iron it
awful,
out.
right? Oh man.
and also, you mean this guy, if my animal body rubs its genitals up against another animal's genitals, you mean to tell me that act, it dehumanizes me in some way, but not your metaphors for what I am? Your metaphors of that I am a chewed up piece of gum. I would say that is dehumanizing. I'd say that is not taking into account that I am a complex being that's alive and evolving with intellect and vision and creativity and no.
But that's how you feel
chewed
now.
up piece of gum. I know. But at the time I absorbed all those messages and I was just like, holy shit.
Are you
This
feeling
is
emotional
serious.
right now?
Yeah.
Why? So take us back. You're a teenager now. You've got your dad's virginity checking you all the time. You don't want to be a crumpled up piece of paper. How did the Christian dream start falling apart for you in high school? And if so, how?
It did. And the way it did was that
Was it a boyfriend? Was it a party? Did something happen? Was there a beginning to the end?
yeah, what was
Where you started turning down the dark path kind of thing?
it was probably,
If you want to share.
yeah. It was in high school. I just started, that's where you start to, developmentally, it's where you start to break away from your family unit in terms of I'm an individual and here's how I'm going to express myself. I'm going to wear minor threat t-shirts. I'm going to wear these sneakers. I'm going to, you start to be I'm a I'm a me. I'm not just a member of this family. And I think I started doing that really, really strongly. And I think, yeah, when I started with boys, and like I honestly was just drawn to, I wanted to fit in. I was looking for belonging, and I just started like going to high school parties and stuff. And some boy I liked one time was like smoking, and he was like, "Do you want me to teach you how to smoke?" And I was like, yeah, like just to be rebellious. It's that thing of like all that repression almost leads to obsession. I see it with so much of the community that I come from, the tradition I come from. The thing that they're so prohibitive about is, it's like what you're saying. It's like, you want me so badly not to have sex, but all we do is talk about my sexuality. It's so prevalent in this environment. And so now I'm like seeing myself as a sexual creature because I'm seeing myself through your eyes, because I think you're only seeing me as a sexual creature. You know, that repression. I mean, as a psychologist, is that like a real thing of that repression is like the other side of that coin is obsession?
It totally can be that way. Yeah. Yeah. Like, and I want to focus on your story, but like in our culture, porn is like the worst thing a teen can do almost, besides sex, like porn.
Look at porn?
And so, yeah. And so you can't go to a Mormon church service without porn being mentioned. Wow. And so porn's mentioned all the time, and the worst thing you can do, guess what the per capita porn use in Utah is? Utah is like one of the highest, if not the highest per capita porn usage state in the country. Because you combine, and this is a psychological thing.
The church won't stop talking about it, so the kids are like, I got to see what this is.
Exactly. You combine never think or talk about it or do it with it's the most horrible thing if you do, and then you get a teenage brain. Yeah. You're actually multiplying the frequency and the severity of whatever behavior you're trying to squelch.
Yeah.
So you create the monster that you claim that, everyone should fear. You create it in the people. So is that what happened to you? So you're trying to not be sexual with boys.
Right. But that's so funny, John. I'm having so many revelations. Because as you're saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have until today said that, but that's exactly it.
How was it for you? So you're trying to be pure. And your dad's virginity checking you constantly.
Yeah.
You go to these parties.
And then, and I liked it. I was like, and it's so funny now to look at it in that light and be like, oh, maybe the reason was because it was so all around me all the time that I was just like, all right, it almost was like curiosity killed the cat for me, where I'm like,
don't look in the closet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I finally looked, and
so you're saying you had sex with them.
when I was 17, and then all around that same time, I drank, I smoked, and I had sex, and so I was like, well, I guess now I am fucked with a capital F.
How did it feel? I mean, it probably felt great at the time. I wasn't asking that. I'm saying afterwards.
Oh, I wanted to die. I was like, I was like, hell is going to be really rough. And in evangelicalism, I'm not even like doomed to hell because I did the worst three. I could be forgiven for that if I threw myself on the mercies of Jesus. You know, anytime, like he will always, his grace is sufficient, right? But I just knew. I was like, oh no. I was like, this is who I am. And looking back, it's who
you are.
It's who all of us are. We are animals who were created to procreate, or we wouldn't be here. Yeah. I'm fascinated with the church's obsession with no masturbation. I would think that if you do want to curtail some of the like real problems can come from actual sex. Like why wouldn't you be telling all the kids like, go to town, man, go crazy. It's just you and your body. It's not going to hurt anybody.
I actually have an answer, but I don't want to derail your story. But in Mormonism, you need the members to feel like they're dependent on the church.
Right.
And so you need them sinning so they can feel terrible, so that they can turn to the church to get forgiven for their weaknesses. So you tell them not to masturbate or look at porn or have any sexual behavior, And you do that enough, they're guaranteed to do those things they're not supposed to do, so that they're guaranteed to feel horrible, which is what you want, so that then they can go confess and say they're terrible and I need you, church, more than ever. And that's how you bind them. So I'm not saying it's cynically a business model, but I call it Mormonism's and maybe Christianity's business model. You want the members to feel shamed and horrible and terrible,
Right.
so that they need the church, which is exactly what happened to your paternal grandpa, right?
Yeah.
Like your dad's dad got in horrible places. And eventually, how did he clean up? He confessed to the church and realized that he needed the church to keep him on the straight and narrow.
I mean, John, whoa, Nelly. That is so interesting. Because I don't think people in church, like pastors or bishops or anything, they would never say those words.
No, I don't even think they think it.
I don't think they're necessarily conscious of it.
I don't think it's conscious.
In the tradition I come from, they would say, honestly, it's the best way to live is to not be like touching yourself all day and sleeping around and getting hammered and hurting your lungs. Like they would say, it's just the best way to live. And it's also, they would say, it's that we are called to be like Jesus. And Jesus wasn't jerking it and sleeping around and sticking it in people and smoking cigs in the Bronze Age and the Fertile Crescent. And, Jesus wasn't doing that, and we're called to be like Christ, and it's going to give you a better life, is what they would say. But this,
and I think they believe that.
They 100%
and there's
believe
truth
it.
to that.
There is truth to that, absolutely, and they 100% believe it. But the sinister thing underneath that you're referencing of like, this is a shame cycle, and we are in a place of Stockholm syndrome where we love our captor, and think about it, like the essence of this whole relationship we have with this creator is that like it's all based on guilt and shame. Like you need me because you are shameful. Will you admit it? Yes, I am shameful. I am in need of you. Please forgive me and bring me into your fold. Wow. I need a cigarette from this talk, and I don't even smoke.
It's kind of a codependent, abusive.
It is.
Spouse kind of relationship.
It is.
Without intending to be so, intending to just give people the best lives as possible. But what's the classic indicator of an abusive partner? You're nothing without me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You need me.
Yeah. And it would break a lot of good people's hearts to hear these words, and they would fundamentally say, you are wrong. And that is not true. And that is the thing I notice all the time. I try to pay attention to that in me, because I know, because when you see someone else doing it, it stands to reason that I'm probably doing it in other ways. Like I felt like that a lot with like Black Lives Matter movement of like, oh, wait, if I've this whole time been like, cops are good, cops are good, cops are the good guys, cops are the good guys. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wait, this is an organization that's established in really like systemic racism, and it's hurting a lot of people, and it's essentially there to protect white wealth. And like our brothers and sisters of color are being murdered in front of us all of the time.
And we're like, paradigm shift, right?
Yeah. And so when I go from like, oh, wait, I'm, what are the other ways in which I'm going, but cops are good. Cops are good. I have to be doing it in other ways.
Yeah.
And what are those ways? It sort of keeps me up at night. Like what, what are my blind spots? What are the things that I'm doing? Even like you, Jen, is saying, like, oh, I did that with my kids, and your intentions were so good.
Right.
And you would have passed a lie detector test of that because you believed it was so good. What are the other messages we are giving people sometimes with good intentions? Mm-hmm. I know I'm doing it too.
Yeah.
Jen, you were going to say something.
Oh yeah.
I forgot what I was going to say earlier, but yeah, exactly. And I think that's actually been part of the hardest the hardest part of my deconstruction from the LDS Church is that seeing all the times where I thought I was doing good and I thought I was being a good parent, and but the perfectionist culture that I was putting onto them, like I've had to like sit down with them and apologize to them, and try to speak differently and like learn different habits now. And at the time, I thought I was doing so good.
Right.
You know, I thought I was saying the right things and like teaching them the right, you know, modestest, you know, kind of things. And now, like, just the way I've changed the way I've talked, like my daughters even see it. Like my second daughter came to me in tears, and we had a conversation because she was jealous of how I was talking to my youngest, because she was like, I wish you would have talked to me like that, Mom. Wow. And it was hard. I had to sit in that and kind of take that in and like understand that, you know, I thought I was doing the best I knew how to do at the time, but I'm so glad that I know better now.
Right.
And I'm trying to do better.
Right. And at least you got there.
But but I see, like, and that's why I think I can hold space for everyone where they are, because I remember being there and I remember thinking I was doing good.
Right.
You know?
Right.
You know, which probably your parents are thinking, 100%. You know, like I was trying to, you know, bring her up and, you know, and it's hard to fault them.
Right.
But, you know,
it's all those evangelicals who voted for Trump because they got to save those unborn babies. And we might not have a democracy pretty soon, but like we got to save those unborn babies. And I mean, and again, like it is, man, it's really thick and tricky and complex and hard. And it's so, I tend to react very strongly. Like even we're talking about in adolescence, I just reacted to being like, then I'm doing it. Here I go. I'm sliding down the hill. And
so you mean you became extra sexual because you like had blown it? Is that what you mean? What you just meant? Or did I totally misunderstand what you were saying?
Oh no, I think I don't know what I was just saying with that.
Well, because I'm curious, once you knew you were a crumpled up piece of paper.
Yeah.
Once you knew you had disappointed your dad.
Yeah.
And disappointed God.
Yeah.
Where did you go from there?
It's really interesting, John, because I felt like I learned something from an episode you did with, what's his name? The Neon Trees person.
Tyler Glenn.
You two talked about a phrase that really popped out in my ears. One of you said learning to lie. And I was like, oh, whoa.
Is that what happened?
Yeah. And I until I heard you say it, I never would have. I've always kind of beat myself up because I became quite the bullshitter. So
you didn't go to your dad and say, "Hey, Dad, I blew it."
No.
Hey, Dad, you know that you always checked in with me.
Yeah.
I did it, Dad.
No.
What? So what'd you do? What'd you do the next time he checked in with you?
The same thing I always did.
What'd you do?
I was like, yeah, Dad. I just acted like everything was same old, same old. I mean, to this day, I don't think he knows. He probably knows, but he doesn't want to know, you know?
Yeah.
But like,
So learning to lie.
Learning to lie is very interesting because I have always beat myself up because I for a long time there, I became a big bullshitter. Like I was just full of it, man. I was, and I thought that a lot of that came from just crushing low self-esteem. I thought that who I was so unworthy and so detestable and so incriminating and so fill in the blank that that's why when you said learning to lie, I was like, whoa. Because I think I just started giving a version that was acceptable. And the more I learned to lie, then, it becomes a performance of sorts. It's funny that I became an actual performer.
Because there's the public self and the private self.
Yeah. Yeah. And I watched my dad. I mean, when my dad preaches, like he would never say this and I wouldn't want to hurt his feelings, but like he is a fantastic performer and it's a performance. And as a kid sitting backstage, even at their music shows, or then the way it kind of started to happen with them is the Good News Circle would do these exciting shows and everyone would be whipped up into a frenzy from this like great music of, all the sounds of that time. And, rock and roll and everything was very, compelling. I think it was moving people. It was exciting. And so these shows would get people, to this state that was then very able to, you could come in, and what my dad would do is at the end of concerts, he would start to give these little messages. He would come out, he would talk, he would be funny, he would tell anecdotes, he would be self-deprecating. He was really handsome, and the girls are looking at this hot guy who's been singing this whole time. It's like, yeah, baby. And then he would give the message of Jesus, and this Jesus dude who loves you and is going to powerfully change your life. And do you want to have a better life? Yes. And do you want to finally be comforted from the pain that you're in? Yes. Do you want to, all these things? Yes. And he would have altar calls. And as a kid, I would watch people come down to the altar and get on their knees and have these emotional conversion experiences. And I would just watch it from the side stage. And I'm always seeing in front of the curtain and behind the curtain, And,
so you're saying like it has to be with everyone, the private life of what your dad and your mom and your family lived could never live up to that rapture of a Christian emotional love fest, right? And so there's even with your dad, there's the public and the private.
Yeah. And we have a home where we like really don't talk about stuff. You don't mention it.
Hard stuff, elephants in the room, all that.
All of it. You just don't talk about it. And it's funny, like when we were talking about even this stuff, Jen, of you learning and changing as a mother, evolving in that role and in those relationships and stuff. It's interesting. Like I look at it with this of, oh man, how do I synthesize? I'm trying to say like three things at the exact same time. I wonder if, I'm messing it up.
No, you're not.
What were we just talking about?
So you're basically, you were talking about you learned to lie because you knew you were sinning, but you didn't talk about hard things. So you would make your dad and everyone else feel like everything is okay.
Yeah. Oh, what we were just talking about of like learning these things, and you see it in others, like they believe what they're saying and they would tell us we're wrong about what we're saying, the effects of that thing are, and what are the ways in which we do it and all of that. And even you blowing my mind today with the OCD stuff and everything, like, with the learning to lie thing in a home where you don't talk about it. And I recently, was reading about codependency, which I'm sure you know more about than me because but I was just reading about the idea of codependency, which I've heard my whole life, but I've never looked into it. And as I was reading like what it is, I was like, this idea of behaving in a way that protects the other person from the consequences of their own actions. Like when I heard that, I was like, wait, that's the way we do everything. That's the way everything works in my home of like, that's why we don't talk about it. We don't, because the instincts I have to protect the appearance and everything of my family, of this, of that, that compulsion in me is so strong to protect them even from themselves. And I'm like, whoa, there is so much there. There's so much work to be done. I'm so tired.
Yeah. And so you're learning to lie, which is a problem. But you're doing it because in your family, you don't talk about the hard stuff and you don't want to upset your parents and disappoint them, or even worse, call their attention to the fact that they've inserted you into a very toxic, unhealthy system.
Right.
And so the unhealthy codependence is you maintaining the silence,
Right.
learning to lie, bifurcating yourself into a double life,
Yeah.
and allowing your parents to think they're helping you
Yeah.
when really they're perpetuating deep harm to you
Yeah.
while thinking they're doing you the best thing they could ever do for you.
And intending only good.
Yeah, that's all they want for you.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. This codependency thing that's kind of blowing my mind, because it's like all these things like Stockholm syndrome and OCD and all of that, and
Codependence.
codependency, what you're saying, like,
Was what you're saying. I'm just reflecting back what I'm hearing from you.
it's like it's the molecules that make up these belief systems.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody thinks they're doing good. You know, you think you're doing good protecting your parents
Yeah.
by lying and hiding who you are.
Yeah. And ooh,
Let me ask you this. So as you're sinning, but bifurcating your life and living a double life, but feeling horrible inside, how does that progress in terms of your life? Like where do you go from there?
well,
Like graduate from high school? Were
Yeah.
you faithful through high school? Were you faithful in church? Did you start, becoming attending church less, or like falling away to your parents' mind?
yeah, all that.
Did you quit the church? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I would go with them when I had to. I would get any possible chance to not. I would always, but I would say the name of the game in high school was just that once I'd sort of broken the seal, once I had become a crumpled up piece of paper, then it was just like, well, I'm going to have as good a time as I possibly can because hell's going to suck. And so it was a lot of like, partying, and I still, the purity culture, I still never like had a one night stand, slept with a whole bunch of people. I would always it was always in long-term committed relationships. I think that was a way I was also trying to be like, but I'm not that bad. I might be boning, but it's, it's sort of like simulating the what's
Christian-ish.
yeah, the monogamous. I'm simulating this monogamous standard, or I guess as I look back now. But I got to college and basically was like, because I was always really creative and storytelling and funny, and so I was always kind of like the bad kid anyway. Always kind of like popping off, and I was really into music, and I was really into just all things comedy. And in general, like the essence of comedy is riskiness, right? And so I was always this like little risky. The way you start, the thing that I learned as a funny creature is like how I worked the tool of comedy is like you have to sort of like play with ideas verbally with people to find their threshold of like, ooh, you didn't like that, did you? You didn't like that right there. That was bad there. Okay, so your threshold is right there. And when you find that threshold of what people sort of like deem appropriate or whatever, then for me, comedy for me at least, was that then when I would have to find your threshold so that then I could like dance on it. I wouldn't like move back from the threshold. I'd be like, oh, here are your buttons. So now let's play. Like comedy being a conversation between the audience and the comic and comedy is really powerful because it's disarming. Like if I can make you laugh, you sort of set your weapons and like armor and shield down for a second, and I can kind of like get in a little message to you. But I would have to find your, thing. And so I was always pushing it with my parents, and like there was so much prohibition of our language as a kid, You can't say cop, you have to say police officer. You can't say crap, you have to say crud. No curse words. Never, oh my God. You could kind of sometimes get away with an oh my gosh, but that's not even that good. Just so much regulation of language that then as I started to express my individuality, I was just like, I loved cursing it. And also it's this simple seeming, it at its essence is an arbitrary word. Every word we speak is a metaphor. So it's just, I say a word, it puts a picture in your mind. And And I'm like, whoa, that's powerful. I can say this word and somebody will jump. Like I can control your body and in a way, like not control your body, but I can affect you physically. And which is also what comedy is doing. Like I do something and then all of a sudden now I can see everyone's teeth and their bodies are moving. They go from still to like open and animated. Whoa,
or they're feeling great.
There's a power there. Yeah.
Or you're releasing endorphins or
Yeah.
oxytocin or
Yeah.
serotonin.
And that makes me feel good. I'm making them feel good and that makes me feel good.
Yeah. It's a rush, right?
Yeah. And it's attention and all that stuff. So I was already I was always just kind of I always was sort of like, what's the boundary? And then I would just push it, you know? That was just kind of the way I operated. And so when I had a little bit of autonomy that came with going away to college, I just started like pushing every boundary, you know? Then I was able to, you know, do more with my boyfriends or this or that, or, you know, be more naughty in the way that I would party or, you know, find pot or whatever. And, you know, so I got to college and just found all the the bad kids who were sleeping through chapel and, you know, or the drama nerds or, you know, and yeah, so got to college. And the interesting thing that happened though, is that I went to a Church of God school. My dad was then teaching at a Christian college. He was a Bible professor. And so I had the opportunity to go to a certain coalition of colleges tuition free. And, so I just sort of picked one and ended up and I remember as we pulled onto campus.
Ended up where?
Anderson University in Anderson, Indiana, a little Church of God school, probably like 3,000 students or something, liberal arts. It said a Church of God school on the sign as we were pulling up. And I was like, what's Church of God, Dad? And he's like, they're all right. Because I would always check, you know, like Wesleyan, Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist, you know, I would always... Catholics, I would always be like, how are the Methodists, Dad? And he'd be like, well, you know, their doctrine gets a little loosey-goosey, but they're all right. You know, like whatever, you know, oh, you know, for First Assembly, you got the Pentecostals are getting a little wild, you know, pushing it in some directions that, you know, it's not my cup of tea or whatever. But I remember asking like, what's Church of God? And he was like, you know, they're all right. There might be a little bit of danger for some like progressive, like there might have some like twinges of like some liberalism in there. You know, hopefully they'll be more on the conservative side. Okay. And then I ended up in a philosophy class where the professor, Dr. Reed, gave me a book and asked me to write him a paper on it. And it was called The Myth of Satan. And I was like,
uh-oh,
what are you talking about, the myth of Satan? Satan is a very real, like, being. I mean, I don't like all the heaven and hell, God and angels, demons and Satan and all that stuff. I don't like it, but it's true. And I read this book and was like, because then I started to be like, wait, I'm doing the math on everything. I remember like my aunt and uncle were Christian missionaries to a Hopi reservation in Arizona. And when I would go visit them and we would go into the Hopi, villages and see traditional rain dances and stuff. I remember one of the first things I noticed when I walked into my aunt and uncle's house is they had these Kachina dolls on the mantle of their house. And I was like, what are those? Because they're kind of like, they have like mean faces and they look scary. And they were like, oh, Kachina dolls, you know, the Hopi, the Hopi people tell their children that if they're naughty and they misbehave during the day, the Kachinas will come into the village at night and beat them. And I'm like, oh, so just like a way to regulate behavior with threat. And I'm like, oh, like maybe the idea of Satan is a way to regulate behavior as a threat. And I just really, as I started to learn how to think critically in college, I just started being like, oh man, I mean, maybe it wasn't that like, maybe it wasn't that I didn't have the Jesus gear, i.e. I wasn't predestined. Maybe it's that I'm thinking. Also, you and I talked previously about our mutual friend, Bart Campolo. One of my favorite things that he says is that his father, who's a big evangelical leader and deep believer of the Christian faith to this day, and Bart is out to his dad as not being a believer. And they have these compelling conversations. And I think they even have a documentary and a book, Why I Left, Why I Stayed. Mm-hmm. And Bart talks about how his dad asked him, like, you've been reading all these things like Sam Harris or different writers, like all these books you're reading, like what's the one that made you not believe anymore? And Bart's like, the Bible.
Yeah.
I read every word of the Bible. And when I look at what's in there, knowing what's in there, I am not a believer of this thing. And I kind of went that way for me. And it's actually now a big part of like why I do the podcast I do. It's a satirical, it's an improvised satire of a fictional megachurch. But what I'm doing at its essence is I'm wanting to create a conversation with listeners about theological illiteracy and about this community and tradition that I come from is, for the most part, in my opinion, overwrought and overrun with people, with believers who have built their entire idea of reality on a book that they do not know what is in that book. They know a few things. They know some things. They attribute a lot of the things that the church or culture has told them is in there, they think that are in there. And a lot of times I'll be like, show me that in the Bible. It's not there. Yes, it is. And they could pass a lie detector test that it is, you know?
Like heaven. I think you mentioned earlier the idea of heaven.
Yeah. And when I was in college, as I started to be like, wait a second.
Is there a Satan in the Bible? Like, is that another, I don't mean to stop where you were going.
There is in the book of Job, Satan and God are sitting around having a conversation, and God's like, you seen how much this guy Job loves me? And Satan's like, yeah. And, and then you know what happens. He's like,
doesn't Satan tempt Jesus when Jesus is fasting for,
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So that wasn't one of the things not in there. You were saying there are things that Christians believe are in the Bible that aren't in the Bible.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And a lot. I mean, like even homosexuality. The word homosexuality was put into in like the 60s or something, like very recently. It was what's the word? Ketamite. The Greek practice of men having sex with young boys. That was like a cultural thing. That was the word in the original text of the Bible, and it got turned into homosexuality. So even a lot of the cultural and Christian, homophobia, which they point to the Bible as like, the whole love the sin or hate the sin thing, it isn't even in the Bible. And that's one of the things that happened for me in college is that I started taking Koine Greek so that I could interpret the New Testament myself, because I was like, if this is the truth, I have to understand it for myself. And so the more I started to think critically and started taking classes like philosophy and stuff and learning how to think and coming into a conversation with my own ideas of reality and consciousness and all of this stuff and what does it all mean? And the more I almost obsessively started studying the Bible. And so I became a Bible and world religions major so I could study all the major world religions, even if it was just like a cursory, and then really dive into mine. And so I learned Koine Greek so I can interpret the New Testament. I took every single Bible and world religion class that was offered in my college. And when I ran out of classes, they let me start taking classes at the seminary. And so while I was an undergrad, I was taking graduate level courses in the Bible, and I was taking literature and history of the Old Testament, all of these different things with professors who could read and speak Hebrew, and starting to understand the original text of the Old Testament. Even
did you learn about biblical criticism and historical criticism, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Took all of the exegetical exegesis classes, all of that. Took all of them and dove in so hard to be like, if this is it, I have to be able to, like Christians love to, talk about C.S. Lewis and how C.S. Lewis was such an incredible thinker, and it's not intellectual suicide. And there is an intellect to all of this and everything. I was like, okay, let's go then. And so he even went to England to study like C.S. Lewis stuff. Now I'm taking these seminary classes, and I'm learning in literature and history of the Old Testament. Now I'm interpreting the New Testament for myself, and I'm learning the context and the original language of the Old Testament. And I'm learning like, oh wait, there's a pagan creation story that way predates the Bible that is also like, oh wait, so this is a borrowed story from a pagan religion. Oh wait, satanic.
The flood.
Yeah, all that. The flood. Yeah. Oh wait, satanic groups speak in tongues. I thought tongues was coming from the Holy Spirit. Wait, like other forms of like Islam and whatever, there are these sects and out like cropping like parts of all the different world religions where they're speaking in tongues. Wait, speaking in tongues is the Holy Spirit of our Trinity speaking a prayer language through us. So wait, how are those other religions doing it? I was under the impression that those were all lies. They're all wrong. They're all misguided, you know? Wait, so maybe is speaking in tongues not a thing from the outside in, but something from the inside out where anybody can tap into it and start, going bananas? Wait a second. So all of these things, and so I was like, whoa, like I'm almost becoming a danger to myself. And now I feel like, but it became empowering. And even though what it did was, collapse my Jenga of beliefs, it now I at the very least I can go into conversations with people potentially who still believe, and I can come from a point of literacy of like I do know what's in your book. I can read it in its original language, at least the New Testament. And the fascinating thing about Koine Greek that the New Testament was written in is that it's an inflective language that's only understood through the way that it is spoken. So you understand, like we understand meaning in a romantic language. We understand meaning because of the sentence structure. I'm speaking with like a subject, an object, a verb. You're understanding because of the sentence structure of how I'm talking. But in Koine Greek, you would understand based on the way they were saying it out loud. So sometimes, like for instance, you could have one word that means 10 different things, and it depends on how you say the word to get the meaning. So when you go and interpret Koine Greek, the only example really I can think of is that if you took the letters, there's also like not spaces and stuff. So you're deciding like where the word begins and ends based on the context of like what you're interpreting. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. So if you saw the letters GODISNOWHERE, what would you read?
God is nowhere.
Okay. But what if it says God is now here? Right?
Yeah.
So that's exactly what's happening when you are interpreting the original language of Koine Greek, is that you're making a whole bunch of decisions. Is this God is nowhere, or is this God is now here? Because those are diametrically opposed ideas. Yeah. And so you kind of put it in context to the rest of what's around it, and you make a decision and you choose. So when you're interpreting the Bible, and when the people in, King James or whatever they're making a bunch of choices there.
Yeah.
And
what about, like, I'm thinking about when I was, like, Mormons are raised to believe that the Book of Mormon is perfect, but that the Bible got screwed up over time. And so, yes, Mormons still believe Bible is a fundamental part of their religious canon, but we believe that the Catholics and the Protestants corrupted it. And so you can't really fully trust it, but you can fully trust the Book of Mormon because it came through Joseph Smith, God to Joseph Smith to the Book of Mormon. And it talks a lot about Jesus. So you grow up with the permission to not fully, to love the Bible, but not to fully trust or respect it. That's how you grow up as a Mormon. So when I'm reading the Bible, I'm feeling encouraged in high school to like find problems with it. And so I'm noticing that the sign above Jesus' head in all four of the Gospels, when he's crucified, says something different each time.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's what we're talking about. Like, can't they get it right?
Yeah.
What is said in the sign above Jesus' head? Or like Judas is dying, and in one place he hangs himself, but in another he's running in a field and he falls and his bowels gush out.
Wow.
Like, see, they can't even get it right how Judas died. And like each resurrection of Jesus, like different people are there when he's resurrected. And like, so this is all kind of Bart Ehrman stuff.
Yeah.
But I didn't know who Bart Ehrman was, but I was noticing these things in high school. What about noticing flaws or inconsistencies in the Bible while you're in college, or just freaking genocidal God that's like killing men, women, children, and animals? Were you having this sort of awakening in college or not? Was that not part of it?
For sure.
Okay.
All of that. And what's so funny to me, John, is that all of those things that you say, like Mormons think that everybody else is like close but no cigar, they sort of bastardized it or whatever. That's exactly what we were taught about Mormons.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly.
What did you think of Mormons?
It was that Mormons it was weird. It was sort of like made up. It's like newer. It's like some guy came to America and like he took like biblical ideas and sort of bastardized them. And, it's like, oh, they're really weird. I remember, cause they'll be like, oh, Catholics are I was taught that Catholics are like sort of okay, but they have like, they worship Mary and that's not good. And it's like, again, it's like they're getting it wrong. But there were certain ones where they're like, oh, they're being a little too liberal or they're getting it wrong. But I was taught that Mormons are just like, that shit's just bananas. And so then when...
were we a cult to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
We were.
Yeah. I don't know if we'd say cult, but ish. And I remember kind of getting pissed when Romney, when all of a sudden they were like, well, if it's between a black liberal and Romney, I guess we got to go
And
Romney.
a Mormon.
And
a black liberal and a Mormon.
Right. And I remember being like, wait, I thought you said, and they're like, he's a family man. He's a good guy. He's all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, but okay. You're the one who said like, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and like, now it's just like, I guess we're always constantly like shifting and going with the lesser of two evils. I don't know.
So in college, did you lose your faith in the Bible and in Christianity in college?
Yeah, but I'd say it took me like a full year. I went to graduate school at Columbia College much later, maybe 10 years later, and still even there, started like studying a lot of like paganism and a bunch of different things, still just kind of scratching at that thing and uncovering rocks in my brain that still had weird dogma under them. But I mean, I would say for me to fully like squeeze all that out of my sponge was a decade of,
deconstruction.
My 20s. Yeah.
So between undergraduate and grad school, you're away from the home. Are you still attending churches? Are you still praying? Are you still reading your scriptures? Are you thinking of yourself as liberated or thinking of yourself as like the prodigal daughter, wayward? How are you thinking of yourself during those 10 years? And what type of life? Are you living a life that your parents would be proud of? Are you living a life that your parents would be embarrassed by? And are you lying to them about it that whole time?
So it's funny. As you were asking that, I was like, no, I stopped going to church. I was thinking about it while you were asking. I was like, I think I tried to sometimes go to church when I was in college to still like be a good kid. But for the most part, no, I stopped going. I was like, it's just never been my bag. I just don't like it. People like it. They get stuff from it. I'm always just like, oh, this place is a drag. So I looked for every opportunity to not. And I probably would have got out of college and never gone to church again. Actually, I did never go to church again after college. But here's the real bonkers part, is that I got out of college and started working at a mega church, like a big evangelical, Bill Hybels, Willow Creek, outside Chicago, big. Like this was, he's the personal spiritual advisor to Bill Clinton. This is big time, baby. It's like, and it was just because I basically, when I graduated from college, I didn't have any skills, and all I'd done was study the Bible and world religions. And I was a double major, and I also was an acting major, drama. And so already I had these two, it's like the Christ in comedy thing was already these like 2 tracks where I have a foot in each world. And I got out of college, came back home, and I was like, I don't know what to do, like serve tables. Where do I work? What do I do? I have no skills. And my mom was like, oh, I just was at Willow Creek and I saw in the bulletin, Willow Creek Community Church, this huge mega church outside Chicago. And my mom was like, I saw in the bulletin that they're looking to hire a drama director for the children's ministry, like doing these, like there's a children's ministry where they use drama. There's like music and drama and all these different things for the children's programming at this church that was, like a rock and roll church with like drum kits and strobe lights and stuff. Fog in the room on a Sunday morning.
Literally?
Yeah, while everyone put their hands up in the air.
Wait,
And
your church had a fog machine?
Oh yeah.
A rock band and a fog machine.
So that it would look like a U2 concert,
Wow.
And the praise and worship is like Coldplay. It's like, whoa, I'm like at a Coldplay show on a Sunday morning.
Well, it sounds like your parents would be proud. That's like,
They were so proud of me. And that really was, that hurts, man, because they were so proud. Because my dad then at the time was a teaching pastor at a mega church, and I was working at the mega church, and I'm like, and I'm moving. So I went and got that job, and I started working at that church, just because I was like, yeah, it's a paycheck, and all I know is church culture. I was raised in a Christian school, Christian college, going to church. Both my grandpas were preachers, my dad's a preacher. It's like all I know. I'm like, I'll do this. So I started working in this mega church, and for the whole time I worked there, for like a decade, I was fully deconstructing to the point where, and I'm simultaneously moving up higher to where finally I got to the point where I was moving up in my role, where then I'm finally like sitting at a table with Bill Hybels and like church leadership, like programming like the weekend services, which that's the big deal. Cause like the weekend services have to be like the driver, the generator. That's what's going to pull people in when they walk in and are like, this is awesome. There's these incredible, compelling like dramas that are like Oscar winning moments. And there's the music's like a Coldplay show and blah, 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 blah. And now I'm sitting at the table with the leaders of this church, the executive pastors, all the leaders. And I'm sitting at the table, like on the creative programming team. And I'm like, fully now admitting to myself, sitting there silently in my mind while they're droning on in a conversation about how to bring more people to Christ. And I'm like, I don't believe any of this. I think I used to think it was true, and I just wished it wasn't true because I didn't like it. And now I don't think it's true. It's definitely not true. I remember in the big green room where we would have our meetings behind the main auditorium, this was like plush. It was like the rug in the green room backstage was enough that I remember one time hearing that the rug cost enough to buy a house. It was pretty nice. And I remember there was a Time magazine in the church, and it was talking about Mother Teresa's. Did you ever hear about Mother Teresa had a crisis of faith?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, C.S. Lewis did too, but we'll talk about that later.
Really?
They don't tell you that.
What? But he came back to it?
A little bit.
I guess Billy Graham did too. I'm right now reading the book Jesus and John Wayne. Fascinating. About how white evangelical Christian culture has continued to shape Jesus into, for a while, Jesus was an incredible businessman. For a while, Jesus was a powerful athlete. And then Jesus was like John Wayne. It's like masculinity, authoritarian, fighting for justice, on the Western Front. Fascinating. But there's a lot in there about Billy Graham. And Billy Graham evidently had a crisis of faith and then just decided, no, I'm just going with it. And then, had an incredible effect on the culture we're now enjoying. But what was C.S. Lewis's?
Oh, well, I don't want to derail your story. I just read an article on this just this past week, but I guess as he got older and older, he started having some public criticisms of his apologetics. And then he falls in love with this woman, and then she dies of terrible cancer.
Yeah, yeah.
And he starts to just like question everything.
Yeah, yeah.
But they don't talk about that as much. You know?
I read his book, Surprised by Joy, about having lost his wife. Yeah. Interesting. Because I was like, I liked C.S. Lewis so much. I was like, I was looking for, it's sort of like Bart Ehrman or whatever. Like I was looking for, there's got to be a good teacher. There's got to be someone who doesn't feel like they're full of shit. There's got to be, and I thought C.S. Lewis would be that for me for a while. But I remember looking at this Time magazine about Mother Teresa's crisis of faith. And I'm sitting there being like, oh my gosh, I work at a church. I don't believe in any of this. I don't believe it's true. I don't even think it's real. What am I doing here? And then I was like, I felt closeted. It was like, now I'm like hiding, talk about like back to the thing we were saying of like bifurcating or like two lives or learning to lie or whatever. Now I'm like this closeted non-believer working at a church. And I was like, this isn't going to work. I have to leave. But the funny thing is I was working at that as a day job to support my comedy habit at night. And so I had spent that whole time I was working at the church. I would race back into the city from the mega church. I would race back into the city, change my clothes, take a shower, blah, 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 jump, go down to the theater. And I would do improv every single night for 10 years. And so I was building up this like comedy life. And I mean, I was two totally different people. I was this person working at a mega church and who was just like a creative consultant, like helping them be the best. And then I was this like absolute, like, non-believer, like comic, just devoting my life to improv and having a great time doing it. But did you ever watch The West Wing?
Love The West Wing. Remember
when they hired Ainsley Hayes, the Republican strategist, to come work for the Democratic presidency? Do you remember that? She was that beautiful blonde actress. And because they were like, we need...
Was that Kristen Chenoweth?
Yeah, was it?
From Wicked?
Oh, it must have been. I never made that connection.
Like Glinda from...
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's right, but...
I was obsessed with West Wing. Yeah. And I was like, oh, remember when this Democratic presidency hired a prominent Republican thinker to help them, you know? And so I remember sitting there, and that was somehow how I justified it for a while, where I was like, oh, I'm like the Ainsley Hayes of Willow Creek, of this big, huge megachurch. I am the other side. I'm the person they're trying to reach. So maybe it's like really smart and helpful for them to have a non-believer at the table when they're trying to reach non-believers. That's their whole point. And they've got one, they don't know it, but they've got one sitting at the table. I'm like, can you imagine how much I could help them speak to people like me? And then there came a day where I was like, wait, I don't want to help them because I don't think this is helping people. I believe this is hurting people. I'm watching this turn females against themselves and have shame, and this authoritarian, like patriarchal culture, and this like white evangelicalism, and no voices of color at this table, and and I started becoming more and more outspoken, and like started pushing on all them. And I was kind of getting myself in trouble because I was really pushing on the LGBTQIA plus stuff of like
homophobia.
Yeah. I'm like, you're on the wrong side of this one, man. And Bill Hybels was a pastor who caught a lot of shit from, he started marrying interracial couples. And that was a whole thing. And I'm like, you've
That's
done
good though, right?
You've done this before, right? You said no. We're not going to do that racist shit. Like, so don't do this homophobic shit, you know?
Yeah.
And I started really...
What'd they say?
It wasn't going well. I mean, there wasn't a lot of... I had to very tactically know who I could like voice those things to and when, and so I kind of started really pushing on it, and then there reached the day, and then the nice thing was in that time, I fell in love with this other improviser, a comedy guy named Greg, and we got married. And once we were married,
was he a Christian?
No, but raised in the church. But he didn't get hammered with the evangelical stuff like I did. He was Presbyterian, and he kind of grew up being like, "This is cool," but he had a big time purity culture too, and he kind of similarly, he studied, he actually was going to go, he studied religion at William and Mary, and then was going to go to seminary because his grandpa was a pastor. He was like, maybe I'll do this. And then he was like, oh wait, in college he realized, he's like, I don't think I believe any of this. And so he had been in an improv group in college. And so he moved to Chicago to do improv, and I met him doing comedy at night. And so we were sort of similar. I think that made me feel kind of safe, that he kind of knew the language and the culture and the world and the tradition that I came from, but he was similar to me now. And now it's like, it is such a big part of our relationship is us constantly having these conversations of like like he's the one who got me this book, Jesus and John Wayne. And I'm like, whoa, this author is speaking to she's singing a tune that is all the notes I've been playing this whole time, but she's putting them together into a perfect song. And Greg is really great about like constantly engaging with me and stimulating conversation. This is my favorite thing to do. What we're doing right now is like talking about this and making discoveries, and even like Jen, you being like, oh wait, I did that, or you being like, oh, that's OCD, and like the constant, I love that like growth and the insights and everything. And so when we got married, Greg went and took this really terrible day job that he hated to be able to support us. It's gonna make me emotional too. And he was like, Holly, I got us for a while. Like, you can leave. Like, it's hurting you to feel closeted, working for a church that you don't believe in, that you're starting to think that maybe you're part and parcel of a hurtful commerce and not a helpful commerce. So he made it possible for me to walk away from it. And that was so good for me. It's such a beginning, the beginning of a journey of, being able to start like healing from it. And I think my podcast, Mega, I didn't even mean for this. This is a side effect of it, but I think satirizing it and starting to laugh about it has also been really healing. And it's also been like, when I created Mega, I was trying to reach comedy nerds. It was a podcast for comedy nerds. And then that was the target. And then what I ended up hitting was these two like other camps of like cool Christians and ex-evangelicals. And I'm like, are you cool Christians who like this? Are you listening to what we're saying? Or is there a new kind of cool Christian who's able to laugh at themselves and not take it too seriously and not white knuckle it and be like, no, you can't, that might be a good start or something. And then, but I'd never even heard the word ex-evangelical before my podcast. Like I started, the guy who coined the phrase has the podcast ex-evangelical, and he contacted me and was like, you got to come on. And there's a big ex-evangelical community and everything. And I was like, what? I'd never heard until a friend of mine, having moved to LA, a friend of mine in LA was like, oh, I'm on the waiting list for this therapist in Pasadena who specializes in religious trauma. And I remember in the moment hearing those words, religious trauma, put together, I was like, wait, that's a thing? Oh, of course that's a thing. My gosh.
And I think that'll be maybe a big part of our focus in part 2.
Yeah.
Is healing from that.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you, so your husband volunteers to do whatever he can so that you can quit that job.
Yeah.
What year was that about? Do you remember? What year you would have quit the mega church?
It was probably around like 2009, 10.
Okay. So about 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just ask you this question. So you go through all this. It's weird for me to apply this to another faith tradition, but like, I'm always surprised. Like if you think of, in an ideal world, if you think about like, what does it mean to have parents? What does it mean to have a spouse? What it means is you can tell them anything. Like the hardest, worst things, the ideal parent, the ideal spouse, you can tell them anything.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about the fact that you like were raised in this church, you fell off the path, but you created this bifurcated self, and you were presenting to your parents and your community something that really wasn't who you were, but you started to live that double life and sin, but still make them think that you didn't go to your dad, he's virginity checking you, and that's all you're taught to care about. Then you actually lose your virginity. The last thing you want to do is tell him.
Yeah.
So like he's got no clue. You graduate from high school, you go to a religious college, the whole time you're deconstructing your faith while your parents are thinking, wow, she's at a good Christian school. You know what I mean? And then you leave and you start a megachurch. So your parents are like, oh, great, she's working for a megachurch.
Couldn't be better.
Where you're deconstructing it even more.
Yeah.
By the end, you've got all the 10 years plus college, 14 years of like moving farther away from what your parents raised you to be. And deconstructing and moving away theologically from all the things your parents taught you to believe. And you get to the end of that, you would think that'd be like, Mom and Dad, like, let me just tell you what's happened. And you raised me this way, but this is how it's worked out for me. And you would think you'd be able to go to your parents, forget the religious stuff. You would want to be able to go to your parents and say, Mom and Dad, I've learned these new things. Let me tell you what I learned about the Bible. Let me tell you what I learned about, let me tell you the problems I'm seeing with Christianity and why it's hard for me. And I'm really struggling, but Mom and Dad, you can help me, right? You would think that parenting would be, you could be your most authentic, vulnerable self, and your parents would unconditionally love you. And you would tell them everything, and then they would help you, and then you would grow together. Maybe you'd even teach them some things. And then they would change and grow. Right. And then together you would become more advanced, enlightened citizens. But I get the sense that that's not...
Well, I think what I've discovered today is that it's actually this codependency, because I am actually, the reason I am not going and being like, hey, all these things. And I feel like I'm becoming a more wholehearted,
healthier, more enlightened.
Yes, more enlightened, more authentically me, more able to feel the freedom of actual unconditional love. Like with Greg, I have that. I can tell him the really, really like the frightened, frail, angry, worst possible things, the darkest, most sinister, shameful. But like with my parents, I think the reason I'm not doing that is because it would crush them so totally and completely. And they are such literalists about the Bible that it would not only anger them to no end to hear me say such heretical things about the thing that has like driven and given their entire lives purpose and meaning and that they've dedicated everything to, but also they would be so crushed to know that instead of being in eternity forever in the beautiful, perfect presence of God together with their daughter that they do love, that she is going to be in this horrible place of torment and suffering forever while they're having the time of their life. This person they gave life to, who they deeply love, is in teeth gnashing pain. And I guess I'm just protecting them from that pain. Also, I'm still, this is a great grief of my life, but I am still living up to the standard that was set in my home. In those relationships of my family, I'm still living up to the standard that was set of, we don't talk about it. We don't want it. We don't want to hear. I remember one time I don't know why, but I told my mom that I had smoked pot. This might've been when I was like home from college or something. I was always like, sometimes when I start going and I'm like trying to be funny and stuff, I like am pushing something too far, and I pushed it too far, and I was honest with her about that. And she tackled me flat on my back, knees on my shoulders, on top of me, and was like, tell me that that's not true. And I was like, it is true, though. I've actually done that. And she was like, tell me it's not true. And I was like, oh, it's not true. And so I used to like get into kind of like sort of arguments with my dad when I was really, like reading the Myth of Satan book and stuff. And I was like, Dad, let's talk about hell. Because that's some shit I don't like, you know? And we would kind of get into it and it would go nowhere and it would be terrible. And we would walk away from it both frustrated and hurt, you know? And I just stopped. I was just like, you know, and we just didn't talk about anything, but like they, you know, they knew. I mean, like I was living with Greg before we got married. And honestly, it was just a like practicality thing because like his lease was up or something and we were moving, he was going to move into my apartment and then his lease was up so he could get a place for 3 months, but pay, but whatever. And we're like, we'll just say we're getting married in 3 months. Like just move in now. We'd been sleeping together the whole time. Like, but, and so, and like my parents were, I was like, are you cursing my marriage? My mom was like, God's not going to bless your marriage now. And I was like, well, I'm just, I'll give it a shot. I'll take my chances. And then, man, my dad, like really, my dad married us. My dad was the officiant. And my dad like really embarrassed us in our wedding. Like during the ceremony, he started talking about, like Christian sex and like the way God wants sex to be. And like my wedding ceremony became about sex and everyone in the audience is like, I mean, my new in-laws and Greg's grandparents and stuff are sitting there and they're like, what? And like, it was the most awkward, like, and all my comedy friends are there and they're like, they're all sitting up in their seats. They're like, this is actually a real life Christopher Guest movie.
This is material.
They're like, this is material. They're like, this is actually the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I was so humiliated in front of everyone I love. I was so humiliated. I remember, like, I remember Greg's hand, his nails were digging into the palm of my hand, digging in so hard that I like looked at him and I was like, you're hurting my hand. And I looked up at his face and I could tell that it was like, he, like all the doors were shutting. He was like going a million miles away. And I was like, I am too, like I am dissociating from this. I spent the entire reception just like everyone was coming up, Holly, you're so beautiful. And me being like, I didn't know that was going to happen. I'm really sorry. I'm embarrassed by this. Like, I was like traumatized. I cried for most of my honeymoon. I was like, because I trusted my dad. I'd seen him do so many weddings and he was always so good. And I was like, this is going to be the like secret golden ticket part of the wedding is when everyone sees how good my dad is. And like, and then he really deeply humiliated me and it was so hard. And like, I was like, the first year of our marriage, I was like,
wait, what do you think that was about for him?
A basket case.
What was he doing in his mind? What was he thinking and feeling?
I mean, isn't that the question? When we came back from our honeymoon, it was so bad. Like Greg and I went to my parents' house and we're like, we have to talk about this, which is also like, I'm breaking the number one rule. But maybe it was like Greg was able to do it. Greg was like, I would like, you know, an explanation for like what happened there. Cause that was my one wedding. And that was, and my dad basically, he like really did not want to talk about it. And I could tell we weren't going to get much from him. It wasn't going to be a like, let's talk.
Or to hurt.
Yeah. It was like, no. And he, basically what he told us is that he was like, I was on a lot of cold medicine and, I had been reading this Christian book that I found really exciting and compelling. And it had this chapter about like great Christian purity culture, like Christian sex and marriage. And I just was cribbing a lot of it from that chapter that I thought would be, cause I was like, were you doing that? Cause like I had all my like comedy friends there that were all like, you know, bad sinners, who were all out like, you know, doing drugs and sleeping with each other and stuff. And I was like, maybe is he trying to teach them a lesson? Is it because he knows I didn't stay sexually pure? Was it punitive? I don't think it would be punitive. I mean, sometimes, John, I'm like, I don't know.
Have you heard of Mark Driscoll?
Oh yeah.
Was he reading Mark Driscoll at the time?
I could ask him.
Well, here's what I was gonna say, and I'm so sorry that happened.
Oh, thanks, man.
I'm so sorry. And
yeah, that was rough.
what I've thought about in Mormonism and in high demand religions, and I'm feeling like it really applies here, but you can tell me, like, okay, we talked earlier about like how a Christian pastor or a Christian dad is going to teach purity culture thinking they're doing good.
Yeah.
When oftentimes they're actually doing harm.
Yeah.
But they think they're doing good.
Yeah.
Right? Like, your parents were trying to do good.
Yeah.
And they were raised as Christians to think of parenting in a certain way, which is you purity check and you virginity check and you police your kids' morality and you be kind and loving, but then you never talk about anything. And like your mom said, she didn't want to know.
Yeah.
Like, obviously there's a lot of head turning going on
Yeah.
in Christian families.
Yeah.
Because what kids can ever live up to those standards? And so the parents kind of want to live in this sort of like a reality void where they don't really want to know what their kids are doing.
Yeah.
And so you're going into college and adulthood doing stuff that would be horrific for your parents, but they don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
But the presiding rule is don't be vulnerable, don't be honest, hide, lie. Your mom's even telling you to lie.
Yeah.
They want you to lie. They don't want to know, right?
Right.
And and a lot of that interaction's about you trying to be honest and then getting your mom tackling you, those horrible reactions.
Yeah.
And the violent, emotionally violent, and sometimes abusive reactions when you try and be vulnerable and honest or say you don't believe or, haven't followed certain this or that. That's all right out of the Mormon playbook as well.
Yeah.
And what it kind of brings to my mind is this idea that it creates, like, there's this perception that the Mormon family is the ideal family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Parents that love their kids.
Yeah.
And a family that's happy. And on a surface level, that's often true.
Yeah.
But what's actually going on below the surface is hiding and lying and double lives and conditional love and the worst form of parenting, which is this be good or I won't love you. I'll look down on you. Yeah. And if you're doing bad, just lie. I want you to lie. Yeah. Like, that's the worst possible foundation for a parent-child relationship and for a healthy family culture.
Right.
It's horrible.
Right.
It's abusive. And I always say the first sign of a cult is if you lie to your spouse or lie to your parents because you're afraid to tell them the truth. Because who should you be truthful to more in an ideal world than your own parents, especially when you're an adult? It's one thing if you're a kid messing up, but once you're like an adult and you're about to get married and you're an adult now and you've been processing things, who in the world should you be able to have a heart to heart with more than your own mom and dad?
Yeah.
And they're the ones you feel like you have to lie to and hide from, and you're ashamed.
Yeah.
That feels horrific.
Yeah.
That feels violent and abusive and horrific. And no shade on your parents. Yeah. I'm sure if I met them, they're lovely. Yeah. Maybe.
You'd love them.
And most Mormon families are lovely on the surface. But that framework, that system of hiding and lying and conditional love and judgment, it is at its core fundamentally abusive and emotionally and psychologically violent.
Yeah. And you're describing the God of the Bible, of like, it is the definition of conditional love. It is the definition of conditional love. Because if you don't devote yourself and behave, if you don't obey me and behave in the way that I have deemed appropriate, I'm going to kill you. You're dead.
Either physically or spiritually, right?
Right. I mean, well, hell, the very real hell. And it's funny because I almost feel like the stuff Jesus was actually talking about was like freedom and
compassion and empathy and integrity and
and I do believe that the truth does set you free. And I don't see a lot of those fruits of the Spirit that I mentioned earlier falling off the church's tree. Jesus said it's love. And against that, there is no law. Like, don't let any law come over love. And now, like, Christians are actually voting for laws to, like, take away the rights of human beings. I mean, look what's happening in our country this week with, like, women. It's women's health care, but like, yeah, it's tough, man. And that brings me back to the gratitude that I have for the comedy community sort of swooping in and filling that, what to me felt like this screaming void of, like, everything I believed about the nature of reality was God and Satan, heaven and hell, and getting people out of hell and getting them into heaven. And when that goes away, holy smokes, it's like now all of that stuff of, like, belonging, worthiness, community, all the things that actually make we are social animals, we're social creatures. Most of our decisions are based on survival. Like, what do I have to do to survive? And a big one is that I need to be in community. I need to know that, like, if I fall and break my neck, like, someone is there to take me to the hospital, we're all just animals trying to stay alive. And yeah, I really wonder if, I think so much of the idea that someone had to die to make you worthy of God's love is really a seed. It's like a nut at the center of this thing that is, like what you were saying earlier, of, like, the shame has to keep driving you back to church. I think there are good things, a lot of the, like, sex positivity and, like, even body positivity and stuff that is starting to come up in my lifetime of, like, oh, wow, that's a way better way to think of things. Oh, wow. It's, like, ooh, I see it as very dangerous to the church, because if we
love our bodies, if sex is a healthy, natural thing that you just get educated about,
then, like, shame, that's kryptonite to shame. And then maybe there's no more church, or maybe this is for part 2, but it is a huge part of why I'm grateful to comedy. And so what happened was, I'd been, really developing my actual passion and vision for life, at night while I was doing improv in Chicago. And it was a cool time. It was a cool era of comedy in Chicago.
And we will focus on your comedy stuff for part 2. Okay. So I'm not cutting you off. I just want to make sure.
Great.
So, but did you want to finish what you were, you're saying they were there for you?
Yeah. And it was kind of funny because these things don't always happen in life, like really cool, like leap and the net will appear type of things. But man, it happened for me because, so here I was, my day job was at this mega church. I was feeling so, conflicted about it. I was finally able to, through such a loving gesture from Greg, I was finally able to walk out of there, and man, did it feel good to leave. But I'd been working so hard that whole time I had been working at the church. I'd been working so hard on comedy. And, every single night for 10 years I was playing, I was doing everything. I was writing sketch shows. I was putting up shows. I was like, I was directing comedy. I took every single class at every single comedy house in the whole city. I was, doing it all. And, after 10 years of doing improv every single day for 10 years, I finally made it, onto the bench, is what it's called at Second City. I made it to the bench where you're an understudy for the touring companies, and you have to go sit on the bench and like watch all the shows and know all the shows and be ready to go in if you need to go in as an understudy or whatever. So now I'm sitting on the bench, And Greg, my husband Greg, at the time was actually on one of the national touring companies of Second City. There's Red Co, Blue Co, and Green Co. He was on the Blue Co. And he was touring, and I was on the bench, and I got bumped up to a touring company, and I started touring, and it was making my day job, but it was not enough money to live off of. You still had to have a day job. And so I was getting in so much trouble at work because I just was like, this is my priority. This is what I want to do.
Oh, at the megachurch?
Mm-hmm. And
okay.
and my direct supervisors were getting more and more pissed because they were like, they could feel that, like, I'd always been a problem child there because what they wanted was nothing short of your life. It wasn't just your job. You also were in a small group, and you attended the services, and you were part of the community, and you were, you were volunteering, and it was like everything. And I was like, no, this is a job for me, man. And I like never was there for services. I never, and that didn't play well. And it really was a problem for a really long time. And so, I went in, so when I knew I was quitting, I went in and to have a conversation with my boss to put in my 2 weeks. And my boss was sort of sitting there prepared to really like reprimand me and give me the old, like, you got to get in line and, do the whole deal like the rest of us. And I was like, actually, I'm quitting. And the day that I turned in my laptop and my keys to the HR department and like signed my papers or whatever that I was like, no longer employed there, I got in my car and I drove out of the parking lot and I was like, whoa, I have showed up here at this place for so many years and I am never coming back. This is a feeling, man. Like, I'm driving out of here for the last time and I'm never coming back. And man, this might be like it just felt like a big life moment. And then all this fear raced in and I was filled with crushing anxiety where I was like, oh no, but what am I going to do? And I was in my car driving on I-90, driving back into the city to the neighborhood I lived in. And I was looking at the huge, like, beautiful skyline of Chicago. And my phone rang. And it said Allison Riley, who's the producer of the main stage cast of Second City in Chicago. And I was like, why is Allison Riley calling me? Hello? And she was like, how you doing, Holly? Blah, 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 small talk. And I was like, great. And she's like, are you in the car? And I was like, yeah. She was like, would you pull over for a second? And I was like, pull over? I'm like, who died? I was like scared. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, I'm calling because we're offering you a spot in the main stage cast for the next review. And honestly, John, it's all I'd ever wanted. It's what I'd worked for every day for 10 years. And so had, hundreds of other improvisers, and there's 6 spots, thousands of improvisers through the years. And there's only 6 spots on that stage. And, as I was driving away from that place that had become such an albatross, and, is that the right use of the word albatross? And, man, I leapt and the net appeared, and, that was quite a moment. And so for the next 3 years, all day long, I would write comedy, and all night long I would perform for like sold out rooms of people who were there to eat it up. I didn't have to go to Kinko's and make show posters and put them up on telephone poles all over town and like hand out flyers and try to get people to come to my shows and, try to like whatever. Like, I just got to show up and put on my show clothes that they had laundered for me and bought for me, and hear the stage manager be like 15 and be like, thank you, 15. And put on my makeup and get ready and just shoot the shit and do the dumbest bits with the 5 funniest people in the world. And we would do these shows every night, and the laughter was like, it was like a drug, and it just would come in like waves every night. And then you become so familiar with it that you even like, you have a bad audience one night. Like, a lot of times Friday night late shows, the 10:30 show on Fridays are always pretty bad because people are tired because they actually worked that day. And also it's after 10:30. So now they've had a few drinks. So they're a little bit like intoxicated, and it can end up being, like a slog. And like, wow, what an incredible privilege that like live comedy can become a slog, and it truly was the best. And then and we would have improv sets at the end of you would do the like full sketch review that was like directed and set and everything, and light cues and chair sets and everything. And then we'd tell the audience like, and now we want to improvise for a while, like order another drink. We're going to do an improv set for half hour, an hour or so. And I got to improvise every single night, like as my job, which was all I ever wanted. And it was really great. It was like, whoa, what do you do when you actually get the only thing you ever wanted? It's weird, man. It's really weird. Because then there came a point where I was like, I have to eventually leave this job and I have to figure out what's next. And man, that for me was honestly like, I grieved leaving that job as if someone had died. I mean, the grief for me was as deep as it was for grief I've had with death. Like,
you were leaving the church, sort of, right? You were leaving religion, kind of. No?
Oh my gosh, John, this is why you're so good at it. Yeah, I never would have thought about it like that. But I mean, I couldn't. I never did. I didn't realize that. I knew like
something big was happening.
Because like my other friends left the show too and moved on to the other jobs and whatever. Saturday Night Live, all this stuff. And I or just leaving the show, and they weren't crushed. I was like crushed. I mean, yeah.
When you left what?
When I left Second City.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, I was crushed.
So tomorrow when we do part 2, I want to talk about your comedy career. Cause again, I want to geek out a little bit about that.
Okay, cool.
But I want to go back to when you're leaving the megachurch, right? And you're getting that, you're making the decision and you quit and you're leaving the church and you're wondering what your next step's going to be. And you get the call.
Yeah.
Right? That almost sounded like, number one, a leap of faith that you're leaving.
Yeah.
And then number 2, divine intervention that you get blessed for taking a leap of faith, except you're leaving your religion.
Yeah.
And going to do something secular.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering how that was for you. How did you process the fact that you left your religion, you left your church effectively, and went to do something very secular, but it almost felt like divine intervention? How did you process that?
That's crazy, John. I don't know that I don't know that I did process it on that level, but you're exactly right. That's what was happening. And I think what you're saying is true. I think I made comedy my religion. It filled all the same things. It was the community. We gathered, we had leaders, we had language, we had lingo, we had codes of conduct. I mean, you have the comedy, you don't steal jokes, you don't crib material, you don't, you do the, all.
You're prepared, right? You're professional.
Yeah, it became my church. And so, yeah, maybe that was part of the crushing depression and grief when I left, was because I'm like, oh wow. I mean, and man, Second City in Chicago, that's kind of the top. You've like hit the ceiling, in terms of being able to like a job in comedy. And so then my husband and I got into our car with our dog and we drove to LA, and I cried the whole way there. And then it was a really humbling and painful reset, man, to go from like, you start to believe the like bullshit about yourself of like, this thing that I'm doing is really special. It's so special to me. And then you kind of believe the bullshit of like, oh, I must be special. And then I got to LA and I was like, I'm not special. I'm nobody. And, I'd built up I'd gotten up to a certain amount of, I don't know. In Chicago, it was like I was somebody, I could do it. You know, I could do, and I got to LA and I was 100% nobody and had to start from scratch. And that was, wow, that was a really hard year. Like that first year of my marriage was like really hard. I'd say that first year in LA was, I guess wasn't what doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
All right. One final question for this episode. So this has been a beautiful ride with you of your journey from Christ to comedy, or from Christianity to comedy, right?
Yeah.
That was beautiful. Perfect. I want to go back. You know, you just shared with us 3 hours of really intimate stuff, right?
Yeah.
Your most vulnerable and important and interesting moments, including your faith journey, right? And your upbringing. And I'm kind of repeating a tiny bit a theme we've already talked about, but at any point, did you ever go to your parents and tell them what you just told us? This whole story, everything. How the church hurt you, how you studied, how you wrestled with it, lost your faith, got to the mega church, were serving in it but didn't believe and had to leave because it was tearing you apart. Was any of this stuff you could take to your parents and just tell them?
I've had the thought several times while we're talking, John. I've had the thought for the first time in my life, maybe I could talk to them.
But that's my point, is you just told the world something that you, to this day, haven't felt comfortable telling your own mom and dad.
I know.
Like, what because you don't, like, I do not consider myself a religion hater. I don't. I'm not even, MormonStories isn't about taking people out of religion or tearing down faith. It's not. It's about informed consent and about supporting people in transition. However, so even though I had a great religious upbringing, so I'm not anti-religion. I don't hate religion. But what type of monstrous organization, I just want to end on and get your perspective. What type of organization raises to adulthood a kid that goes through such heart-wrenching and powerful and beautiful and tragic experiences that they can never actually tell to their own mom and dad? Yeah. Even they're 48.
Yeah.
And they can't tell their mom and dad what they end up telling the whole world, but they still haven't told mom and dad. What system creates that? What type of system creates that dynamic? Because this is the Mormon experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is the Mormon experience. And it looks like it's the Evangelical Christian experience.
Oh, yeah. You're hitting the nail on the head there, for sure. And it was only in the last few years, like the first time I did Bart Campolo's podcast, Humanize Me, he was like, is there anything we don't want to talk about? And I was like, yeah, I'm not out to my parents. And so I don't want that to come up. And he was like, okay. And so we never said, like, in that, we did a whole interview and we never talked about what my actual beliefs are. And he sent me, like, people were emailing afterwards and being like, what's her, is she or isn't she? What is she? Yeah. And I was like, so I came back on and after I decided, like, I may not have had that conversation with my parents, but I'm no longer going to withhold it from my life of sharing, like, this is actually me. If you know what, because you're asking me, I'm telling you. And anytime anyone asks me now in the last several years, sort of since I've now become more vocal about, like, this is actually me. Anytime someone asks me, I'm more than happy to tell. And they're not asking me. Mm-hmm. And
they don't want to know.
And it's one of the most asked questions I get with my podcast, Mega, because my dad is currently a pastor of a mega church. And I have a podcast called Mega, an improvised satire from the staff of a fictional megachurch. And people are always, in any interviews or whatever, the question I get almost every single interview is like, what does your dad think about this podcast? And I'm like, I don't know. I have not hid it from them. Greg and I talk about it in front of them. I say I have to do a call for my podcast. I am very, and they don't ask. And people are like, well, do they listen to it? And I'm like, I don't know. I think they've figured out how to, like, they're not really technologically savvy. They don't have iPhones and stuff but I think they know how to, I mean, my dad Googles everything. I'm like, what if he Googled my website? Like, I have essays on there of things that I've written, like wrestling with this. I wrote an essay that got nominated for a Pushcart Prize called Villain, where I'm deconstructing all of this and like, who is the villain? Me or my parents? Like, I think that their news source is misguiding them. They think that my news source is misguiding me. You know, like I've been putting it out there. I'm like, what if it wins the Pushcart Prize? And like, what if somebody sends it to my dad or whatever? And I'm always just like, well, then maybe we'll have the conversation. Mm-hmm. And so I've never thought this until this very moment, but maybe actually that's why I am writing these things and sitting and having these conversations and answering these questions and being forthright about it finally, is because maybe that will make that conversation happen. Maybe it won't. And it's one of the great griefs of my life is that my parents are such good people and intended such good things for me and unintentionally harmed me. And all parents do in all ways, you know? Like, yeah,
for sure.
No parent is perfect and you learn and you do your best. But it's really interesting. I've had all these first thoughts today. One of the first thoughts I had when we were talking about sex, I was like, oh, wow, maybe that's a big part of why I never had kids, was because it was so pounded into me my whole life that like pregnancy will destroy your life. I'm like, and I'm so sensitive. Like I take that to heart, you know? And I know a lot of people talk about how it's so insane, cuckoo bananas to be like, no sex, no sex, no sex, no sex, no sex, no sex, no sex. One day, everything goes. Have at it, kiddos. Do anything and everything. It all go. And that these Christian kids are like on their wedding night, just being like, what? I've heard so many girls be like, I didn't want to have sex because I was so freaked out. Like the big X thing of my arms, like pushing away. Like I've spent so much time defending myself against like a male come on. And then in the switch of a light switch, it's like, and now it's all sanctioned and condoned. Again, it goes back to the college stuff of like, wait, marriage all came from a thing of like property being passed down. So there wasn't marriage. Adam and Eve weren't married. Married is about property and it's a thing with the state. Like you're not married when you have the ceremony in the church. You're married when you sign that paper at the courthouse. Like it's all a thing of like, oh, but I think the divine cosmic creator of the universe is so interested in where I rub my genitals that like there's this marriage certificate that ultimately is only about property that is what sanctifies this thing. Wow, sorry, I just really got up on a soapbox about that. No, but it's interesting to me that like maybe that thing with my dad and my wedding was him trying to push it, and maybe me now being honest in the world is me trying to push it. But this codependency thing of protecting someone else from themselves is, I guess, going to be like the number one first thing I got to go get into therapy for and maybe OCD.
Well, I don't mean to be hammering this, but I'm not anti-evangelical Christianity per se. I'm not anti-Mormonism per se. I'm not anti-religion per se, but I will say this: any system that makes it so two-spouse, because in Mormonism, I've literally had this happen where like a wife comes to me and says, I don't believe anymore, but I'm terrified to tell my husband.
Yeah.
Her very husband independently came to me and said, I don't believe in Mormonism anymore, and I'm terrified to tell my wife. Like any system that makes it so two spouses, you can't tell the person you love most, you've given your life to, you can't be honest and open with them about the most sensitive and tender and important things about your life. Any system that does that to two partners, any system that comes between a parent and a child, where the child can't say, hey, mom, hey, dad, I'm really struggling with this. I'm having a hard time with this. I need your help. Can you help me? Especially when they're an adult, is a system, is a damaging, harmful, toxic system. And that's what I loathe. Number one thing I loathe about high demand religions, above the purity culture, above the shame, is the way it destroys families, is the way it comes between families, destroys relationships between parents and children, between spouses. And it's weirdly, darkly validating to see that it's just not our culture.
Yeah. That it's pervasive.
I'm sorry and thank you.
Yeah, exactly. John, I was sitting at a dinner with some friends, peers, and their parents recently, and I was watching my peers talk to their parents, and it was everything I could do to hold it together, because I was looking at them talk, because they were like just talking about everything and anything. Politics, this, the steak, the whatever, the
weather,
everything. And I had the verbal thought in my mind, I wonder what it would be like to not be from a cult and to be able to have these relationships with the people who I so deeply love and who I admired for so long. And now that admiration got kind of toppled because of, the Fox Newsification of our parents has created some really such painful things, And yeah, I marvel. I look at people talking to their parents and I'm like, wow, I what would I give? It is one of the great griefs of my life. And I talk to Greg about this all the time of like, and who knows, maybe it'll happen. Maybe it'll never happen.
What would you give to what?
To be able to like have an open relationship where we talk about everything and anything. I mean, of course, there's some stuff that like, that your parents don't want to hear and you're not going to talk to them about, but just to be able to be like, this is who I am and it's how I see the world and I'm changing all the time, but I'm finally getting to a place where I'm like, who I am is not that bad. And if you knew who I am, you would think I'm really bad. And it would hurt you and it would wound you and all that stuff. And I've been doing the work lately of that thing of coming to believe something other than the fact that I'm bad and wrong and shameful and deserving of a very real hell and all that stuff. And a lot of that comes through the voice of my character in Mega. My character, it's funny, the longer I've played her, the more it like kind of starts to, it's like dinging my soul a little bit to say the things that she believes, which is the things that I was raised to believe. But I think it's also been kind of healing. And it's the number one thing like we get when people reach out to us. It's never about like the comedy. We get compliments for the comedy and that people are, laughing so hard they're embarrassing themselves at the gym or whatever, which is great, that's what I want to hear. But so many people are reaching out being like, this is helping me so much in healing. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But also it's like very strange to be like, I come from a line of preachers and performers, I would say. It's a performance. Yeah. And now here I am. I'm like, wait, do we just undo our Father's work and then our children will undo ours?
Maybe.
I don't know. But I guess the question of what would I give to have that relationship with them is, I guess, the question I need to answer of like, what would I give? Maybe I just have to give a lot of codependency therapy hours and dollars and then just go force it.
Well, we could, that's its own episode because that doesn't always go well. And the truth is some people just never want to have that. And that's one of the most tragic things is when people have to just accept that they'll never have an intimate relationship with their parents. And then sometimes a parent will surprise a kid and actually be really affirming and loving and supportive over time, and they'll change.
Right.
So, but yeah, go ahead.
I think your question that you stated so well of like, again, not shade on the like people who believe, who get good things from it. No, but your question of like, what kind of system? Because you could think about it like, if there are some cultures where if a teenage daughter of a strict family is raped, like they have to stone her and kill her, you know? That's the same thing we're talking about here of like, what kind of system brings that about? And that's like a physicalization of like actual violence, you know, but I never would have put it into the context you're putting it of like, so you can stone a girl for being raped and losing her purity or whatever. But isn't that also kind of like, that's just a physical manifestation of the emotional thing that we're all.
If your parents think if your parents think you're bad, if your parents think you're so bad, they don't want to know what your life is really about. Is that psychological stoning?
Damn, dude.
Jen, you were going to say something. Any reflections before we tie this up?
No, I think I'll keep it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
For next episode?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. I think it's just
you always bring such insight. Everyone loves your insight, Jen. What are you thinking or feeling? We're going to close with this.
Yeah,
and then
I don't want to take away from Holly's story.
Okay.
And mine is super personal and I'll get super emotional about it.
Okay.
But it tied in, but maybe tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to hear. But also if you want to sleep on it and you change your mind, that's cool too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you have any reflections on similarities between?
That's what, like this whole, I have at the bottom of, like I do show notes and time codes during the episodes. And I have my own little Jen notes that I put at the bottom of this, and some in here that I've highlighted and stuff. Just because it's crazy to me, the similarities. And I'm starting to like, as I'm learning here and deconstructing here, where we're mostly talking about Mormonism, like it's crazy to hear the same kind of things in different religions. Mm-hmm. And also connecting with you on that it's not really Jesus you're angry at.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's the religion man-made from Jesus that caused all the shame and anger.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know, it's just like when you left your church and you know, had this phone call that like was still in your life for you was maybe a spiritual experience, you know, and how little things like that can be a spiritual experience, you know, can be something that's, you know, sacred to you. Or like a time in your life where it was a new beginning for you.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm just kind of listening to your story and just writing down things that are coming up that I haven't thought of, but hearing you say them in your own way, in your own religious experience is kind of healing some parts of me. Wow. So I think that's really kind of cool.
Jen.
So
yes.
Anyways,
yes.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of taking it all in right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. It is nuts, isn't it? That like we only know what we know, and our culture of, you know, whatever church or whatever is so specific. And then to hear, and you think like,
we think we're alone. We think we're unique. We think we're special.
Yeah.
We think we had a uniquely horrible experience.
Yeah.
No one else can empathize with us.
Right. And then it's like, oh wait, this is everybody.
Yeah.
And
but see what what I found is if you show a Mormon how difficult Mormonism can be, they get defensive sometimes. But if you show a Mormon how difficult Scientology or Jehovah's Witnesses or Orthodox Judaism or Evangelical Christianity can be, there's enough distance in that story where they can feel comfortable relating to it and then be willing to do that introspection. So you're giving our people a gift by your willingness to tell your story, your evangelical story to us.
Oh, wow. Good. It's great. It's I knew I was supposed to do this.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of like a healing. It's kind of like a healing.
Yeah,
it really is. And it's a healing that like the love that you talk about and like the already being worthy just inside of you, like just you being is like, you're worthy. You know, you don't have to check all these boxes, you know? It's the same, like that's one place, like we can all come together if we choose to and kind of live in that love. Yeah. That would be amazing.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's the most sinister of what all three of us know to be true about these people who believe and who want so badly they believe they're good people and they want to be good and they desire goodness. The thing that's so sinister is that we can be written off so easily because they're like, you're getting it wrong. You're getting the wrong Jesus. You're getting the wrong picture of God. I have the right picture of God. You don't have the right picture of him. And so there's no, and so any kind of like actual, you know, we say in improv that like, the essence of improvisation is listening. So you're a great improviser, and you're a great improviser. But like that active conscious listening, we often confuse listening for waiting our turn to talk. Waiting our turn to talk is not listening. We say in the improv tradition I come from that actual active conscious listening is a willingness to be changed. And that's
good.
And I just feel like the crux is in there of like, if I come into this conversation with you and I'm like, the Bible is actually perfect and the resurrection is true and none of that can be touched.
And I know God's will.
Then there can't be any actual listening happening because listening to understand is more infrequent than listening to respond.
Yeah.
And so I think with a lot of these people, you end up in a conversation where they are listening to respond rather than listening to understand. And maybe we are too. But like this feels really nice because it does feel like we're listening to understand each other. And and honestly, again, the truth will set you free. Like what's the worst that's going to happen?
I recently, and let's wrap up for today. This is so beautiful, but we recently did this interview with Cara Santa Maria, who's a science spokesperson and she's kind of like a media personality. She lives in LA, but she's been secular and atheist since like 15, raised Mormon. But I was thinking she's been an advocate for skepticism and critical thinking and science. So I was expecting I was trying to set her up to say like, isn't it sad that in 2022 religion's so prevalent and science is still struggling and critical thinking is wanting?
Yeah.
And I was expecting her to like say, yeah, religion, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, do you think that if I had a magic wand, what I would do is get rid of religion? I'm like, kinda. She's like, no. Religion can help a lot of people. What I would want to wave a magic wand and do is to give everyone empathy.
Whoa. Damn. Wow. Yeah.
Because that's listening, right? Empathy is listening with your heart to learn.
Right.
Isn't that what empathy is?
Right. Yeah.
That's what we need. It's not that we need to get rid of religion or even churches. We just need to stop objectifying people and thinking that we know everything and learn to listen.
Yeah.
And care and be willing to change. That's what we need. Right?
There's this great story where my husband is in an improv group called the Improvised Shakespeare Company. And they, through a wonderful series of events, Sir Patrick Stewart, who's an incredible Shakespearean actor, he was part of the Royal Shakespeare Company in England and all that before he became like a movie.
And he's part of the Marvel universe. So
Right. And Patrick came to do a show with the Improvised Shakespeare Company, and he'd never improvised before. But he's been acting his whole life, and he has such an amazing, powerful
presentation.
And his Shakespearean language,
Right.
he has a real skill with Shakespearean language and the pentameter and the rhyme and all this stuff. And so, but he'd never improvised before, and he was about to play in this show that's a pretty heady concept. Like it's a 90-minute Shakespeare play that has never been done before and never will be done again. They're improvising the whole time, and they get a title for tonight's play at the top of the show, and then they improvise the whole thing, and they're in full. They're in full. I don't know if it's like quadrimeter, but they're and rhyming the whole time and referencing stuff. It's like really intensely cool and very impressive and incredibly hard. And Patrick so Patrick was like, explain to me how to improvise. And this is before the show while they're backstage in the green room, like doing warm-ups and stuff. And they basically were like, okay. And they gave him a crash course of what long-form improv is in like 2 minutes. And he listened to the whole thing that they were just saying. And he just goes, oh, I believe. So what you're doing out there is you're listening. And they were like, yeah, if you just listen, like it'll like flow out of you. All you have to do is, and he's like, so it's just listening. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, wow, Sir Patrick Stewart just like in one word, like condensed our art form perfectly. All you got to do is listen.
And what's wrong with churches?
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Because if you listen, it's all there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for this talk, John.
Oh, well, thank you, Holly.
And Jen.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, Holly, that's part 1
Yay!
of your 2-part interview with MormonStories.
Okay.
Thank you. It's really beautiful and powerful. You've given our people a huge gift today.
Thank you. Thanks for. I like that you have a degree in psychology. It's very helpful.
I'll bill you later.
Okay. I'm glad now I have your number too. Now I'm going to be like, hey, John, I feel like whenever, like as a person in comedy, I often don't have insurance. And so whenever I meet someone who's a doctor, I'm always like, oh, what is this thing? You know, like, I'm going to start doing that with you with psychology. Be like, John, what's wrong with me?
I'll say I have no idea. But this is wonderful. And check out Mega. Holly is super talented. It's your husband, right?
Yeah,
He does the
Greg.
Australian.
Yeah.
He's super talented. It's really funny. We'll talk tomorrow. Will all be about our comedy career and Mega and what we're doing. That'll be and building a new life after religion.
Yeah.
And all that. So, thank you, Holly. Thank you, Jen. You're awesome.
Thank you. You're sweet.
Thank you, listeners and viewers. And come right back for part 2 with Holly Laurent.
Yep.
Where we're going to be talking about her life after evangelical Christianity and her life with comedy. But thanks for your support. We appreciate all of you who make Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation possible. Thanks for your donations. If you want to support us, go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. And if they want to support Mega, what do they do? Do you have a Patreon?
Yeah.
Or
Mega the podcast, Patreon, baby.
so is it patreon.com/
Mega.
Okay.
Or Mega the podcast?
And they can support you?
Yeah.
All right. We'll include a link to that in the show notes.
Hey, thanks, man.
All
Got
right.
it.
All right, everyone. Be kind to each other. Be good to each other. And most importantly,
listen
to each other. Love you guys. Take care. See you soon.
Is that what you were going for?
Yeah. That's exactly what I was going for.
I was like,
Good job, Lo. Good job.